1310 AM.
It's Monday, October 4th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 8 degrees, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Celebrations following the weekend Panda game as officials disappointed at destruction that it caused to a Sandy Hill neighborhood. Here's City News reporter Perushka Gopal-Kista with the details.
Councillor Matthew Fleury, who represents the Rideau Vanier ward, is calling the Panda game celebrations disappointing. The celebrations quickly escalated Saturday night, where some students were seen on social media flipping a car near the Sandy Hill area. Even though there was an increased police presence ahead of the game, it wasn't enough to disperse the crowd of students. The University of Ottawa has said in a statement that they are immensely disappointed and that the actions of their students were shameful. Although there are no charges yet, Ottawa's Chief of Police, Councillor Fleury, and Mayor Jim Watson are expected to meet up about the incidents later today. Perushka Gopal-Kista, City News.
City News time, 9:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Rather mixed conditions for us today. Some sunny breaks, slight chance of showers too, and a brisk wind out of the east. The high about 15. Tonight, cloudy, slight chance of showers and 11. For today, the high 15.
And right now it's 8 degrees in both Ottawa and in Smiths Falls. Early this morning, Gatineau firefighters called to a 4-story, 62-unit building on Lausanne Street. 100 people had to be evacuated from that building, and the fire service says most people actually were out by the time they arrived because the alarm did go off in the building around 3:30 this morning. Firefighters managed to contain a blaze to a single unit on the 4th floor of that building. Ottawa fire crews battled a vehicle fire. This was inside a commercial garage in the East End. Just after 10 last night, 911 calls indicated fire in the garage on Blackwell Street. Now that's just east of the Science and Tech Museum. Now, crews reported a wall of black smoke and flames as they opened the garage door. One vehicle on fire inside that was quickly brought under control. There was nobody in the building, and the fire was out just before 11 o'clock. Ontario's legislature reconvenes this morning for the first time since June. An anticipated throne speech delivered by Lieutenant Governor will give Premier Doug Ford a chance to present a new agenda. A spokesperson for Ford says the speech will focus on the fight against COVID-19 as a top government priority. The NDP leader, Andrea Horwath, says she wants to see a plan to hire more nurses and personal support workers, reduce class sizes, and support small business. More with the opposition leader coming up on the Rob Snow Show just after 9:30. City News time, 9:03. Very clear patterns have emerged in an Ontario study on skin cancer. Dermatologist and skin cancer surgeon Dr. Anwen Chan says researchers found the prevalence of non-melanoma skin cancer has jumped by 30% between the years 2003 and 2017. The study found younger people, especially younger women, younger than 35, had the highest number of new cases. Annual mortality rates from skin cancer are also on the rise. A new report is shedding some light on how world leaders, powerful politicians, billionaires, and others hide their assets.
You may be known as Teflon Tony here, but this particular issue may stick. Leaked documents showed Tony Blair and his wife didn't pay a penny of the $421,000 in tax when buying an $8.4 million London townhouse. That's because they bought the offshore firm that previously owned it, and then closed that company after the transaction. The loophole legal, but the optics bad. Previously, Blair had stated publicly that the tax system is a haven of scams, perks, and financial district deals. Tom Rivers, ABC News, London.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
When the headlines say X,
he's got the Y.
it's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Pandemonium. And to think, back in my student days, it was Carleton that had the reputation of being the party school. Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. We're always so happy when you make that decision to make City News part of your day, and you're not going to be disappointed today. Very busy news day. We have you covered between now and noon, and and all day long. The big party. The big party is, I think, the big local story today. That's the local story that has knocked all of our troubles with light rail and public transit off the front pages of the newspapers and at a contention for the lead story on the local newscast, the insanity in Sandy Hill. Sandy Hill wants answers. Panda game was terrifying. Panda game party was terrifying, says the headline on the front page of the Ottawa Citizen this morning. The Ottawa Sun goes with flipped off. Out of control, Panda game party spills out into Sandy Hill streets. I mean, this is crazy pictures in the paper today. We're running with police reviewing evidence. Vehicle overturned. Person assaulted during post-Panda game party. That's ottawa.citynews.ca. Public broadcaster runs with out of hand. Out of hand. I would say so. Out of hand. Ottawa street party. Following football game condemned by officials and police. Over at the Supper Hour News, they're running with disgusted and disturbed. Ottawa mayor calls meeting with police chief, councillor, to discuss Sandy Hill street party. Pandemonium. What do you think of it and what should happen now? We are going to get into this with a spokesperson this morning from one of the Sandy Hill community associations called Action Sandy Hill. Actually, I guess there was action in Sandy Hill, no doubt about that. What residents saw, what they would like to see happen now in the wake of this out-of-control party this weekend. We will get into it as well with some of our regular contributors, like crisis communication expert Barry McLoughlin from TransformLeaders.ca. Maybe this is a bit of a cheap shot, but whatever. Isn't it kind of remarkable that the mayor will call an emergency meeting with officials to deal with a wide-open party by drunken university students, but he's in no hurry to call any kind of emergency meeting at all to deal with the all-out crisis in his public transit system? Just as an aside, I couldn't help but just notice that this morning. But look, I want to make an appeal to any of our listeners this morning. If you reside in the Sandy Hill area or have family there, friends there, if you have any information to share, if you have any eyewitness accounts that you can contribute here to our show, if you're a student at the University of Ottawa, you can shed some light on what went down on Russell Avenue this weekend. I would love to hear from you on this morning. We love getting firsthand accounts, eyewitness news, eyewitness news. We love that sort of thing around here, David and I. We have the perfect forum for you to share such information. We call it the Talkback Hour, and we do it every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock. It's an hour of opinions. It's an hour of phone calls, and it's pretty much the hottest hour of talk radio in town, okay? Just ask around. If you have any insider info, just give David a call at 750-1310 after the 10 o'clock news, and he'll put you right on the air. It seems to me as I read the news stories, watch the news stories, listen to the news stories, it seems to me there are kind of like four themes that come through the news coverage and then people's reaction to the news coverage. One is, and it's one of the more puzzling ones to me, but one is they're just kids. Yeah, they're just kids, and they're cooped up, and they haven't been able to see their friends, and they're blowing off steam. I know, it is to weep, isn't it, David? It is to weep. Right? And panda game parties they're nothing new, and there's really nothing to see here. There are wild and crazy parties every year in Sandy Hill, and okay, maybe this one got a little carried away, but in the end, no one was seriously hurt. And the next time this is going to make news is next year when there's another panda game party. we're all making a big deal about nothing. I don't think so. I don't think so. But it's out there. A second one is there shouldn't be another Panda game. And if you don't want wild and crazy Panda game after parties, there's an easy solution for that. No more Panda game. Suspend it, cancel it. You know, the people of Sandy Hill, people in the Glebe, near Lansdowne, they have to go through this every year. And why should they have to go through this every year? People using front yards, backyards as public toilets, the public drunkenness, the general debauchery. And if officials, whether that's officials at Ottawa U or at Ottawa City Hall, really want to teach these young leaders of tomorrow a lesson, first of all, don't be having sanctioned keggers and tailgate parties in Sandy Hill. Instead, cancel or suspend the Panda game. If this is what's going to happen after the Panda game, no more Panda game. We can debate that. Third, a lot of questions about the police response. A lot of questions about how the Ottawa police handled the situation. It sounds to me, now look, I wasn't there, so I can't speak to it. That's why I hope to hear from people who are actually there, live around there. But I'm not on camera tipping over the car, standing on top of the car, while 1,000 people are taking pictures and sharing it all over social media. But there are questions about how the police handled the situation, so I'll throw that out there too. Is it a case of, because this sounds like what it was, the police were overwhelmed by the situation? 2,000 people there? 2,000 people? I mean, I suppose you could have 100 police officers. You could have 200 police officers. What's that against a drunken mob of 2,000 people? Some of the quotes in the news media today, again, just questioning the response from the Ottawa police, and I'm sure there will be a thorough post-mortem of how the police handled this. One resident who lives just quoting here from the paper today, who lives in the neighborhood says the incident lasted from 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. She wonders why it took police so long to disperse the crowd. Police did not issue a warning to the crowd or engage with the people who were on top of the car or damaging property. They were acting with total impunity. Total impunity. One resident called the police repeatedly starting at 7:15, was disappointed when police officers arrived at the scene but did little other than cordon off the area. Residents on the street want answers about what some are calling a riot. A riot. And why officers were not more proactive. So certainly lots of questions about the police and how they handled it, and whether they were, caught off guard, caught by surprise. But again, I wasn't there. And one more, and finally on this topic, people want heads to roll. Like, throw the bums out, right? These leaders of tomorrow, mugs all over social media, maybe soon to be mug shots. What should happen? Consequences. What should be the consequences for such behavior? Suspensions from school, expulsion from school. If the University of Ottawa, and it says so in its statement, says street parties are not what the school is about, well, you wouldn't know it from the events of this weekend, would you? So maybe some punishment is in order, and that might mean the end of some academic careers at the University of Ottawa. So I'll leave all of that with you, and we can discuss it some more during the Talkback Hour after the 10 o'clock news. Also on our show this morning, and another big news story that we'll be following all day here at City News, it's the return of the Ontario Legislature. The speech from the throne is happening now. The speech from the throne happening right now.
Ontario will make significant progress by adding 16,200 more personal support workers to the healthcare system, including the province's long-term care sector.
Pledge $5 billion in spending over 4 years to hire 27,000 long-term care workers, according to the Lieutenant Governor in the speech from the throne happening right now. So that will happen, and then it's the mad dash of the election campaign with Doug Ford's time in office up for judgment in just a few months' time. We did reach out to the Progressive Conservatives, hoping to speak with a local MPP this morning on the priorities for the government with the resumption of the legislature. We were never able to nail anything down, unfortunately, but we will hear from the opposition politicians this morning what their priorities are. I interviewed Andrea Horwath this morning, the leader of the Ontario New Democrats and the leader of the opposition. And a little later, I'll be joined by the leader of the Liberal Party of Ontario, Stephen Del Duca. It's all about aspirations of government this morning and all the ceremony that comes with a throne speech. And then everything will turn partisan because Election Day is scheduled for June 2nd. That's about 8 months from now. And for 3 years, we've all been living in Ford Nation. Premier Ford has been in office for 3 years. His party won the last election in a landslide after 15 years of Liberal government. PCs got off to a good start, then passed a budget that everyone hated. Ford's popularity tanked. Then the government was overrun with COVID. His popularity spiked, like all politicians, and it has been falling back to earth ever since. So I would also, in addition to talking about pandemonium, like to ask you about Ford Nation and his re-election chances. Based on the job that Premier Ford has done here in Ontario, overall and with COVID-19, would you vote for his party again? Does Doug Ford deserve to be reelected? Monday, busy. Rob Snow Show, City News.
Ottawa Markets was created by the City of Ottawa to help rejuvenate the outdoor markets program in Byward and Wellington West, where we have the Parkdale Market. And so we set to work on bringing in the right team with the right experience and reaching out to local vendors and local farmers, because we knew when we did a survey of our customers that that was the one thing that was really important to them, both at Byward and in Parkdale, is to start bringing back that local product. And that's what you can see behind us here at the York Street Farmers Market. We put in place a Farmers First policy, which means that we will deal with farmers from the region first. And we're going to give them priority in terms of placement. They're going to have reduced fees in coming to the market. We've also made it free for any farm that's been in operation for under 2 years. The market also put in place a BIPOC initiative, which is a Black, Indigenous, and Peoples of Color initiative, which provides grants and support opportunities for folks from those communities to come on out to the market to reduce systemic barriers that have existed. As a farmer's market, we can have a variety of vendors here, from an artisan to a microprocessor who's taking local ingredients and putting them into a product in a kitchen and selling that, to breweries and distilleries this year, which were changes that the province put in place, which allowed us to bring in a few of those vendors as well, which I think is a nice surprise for people sometimes at 9 in the morning after a pandemic, but it's been going really well, and you know, some of the breweries have been pretty appreciative, because for them, whether it just be doing delivery or curbside pickup, it gives them an opportunity to come back out and talk with their customer and talk about, you know, what makes their product so special. Throughout the market, the health and safety protocols that you're going to see, masks are still required. That is obviously the case, and you'll see a number of signs noting that around the area. We've got a number of hand sanitizer units, I call them droids, throughout the area that you can sort of just grab a pump or a squeeze wherever you go. But what we've also had to do is reduce the number of vendor spaces we have in the market by 50%. This ensures that we can guarantee that our vendors are going to have that distance, that we can, you know, have a little bit better flow around the market. But what we also did was, as I said, we created the York Street Farmers Market, which is just microprocessors and local producers only, and that's on Saturdays. In Parkdale, we launched the Night Market, which is bringing a lot of the same content, but in the evening, and residents are sort of spilling out into the park. So we're looking at what we're doing as trying to support, create, and enhance public space for the residents of the city. It's been great, you know, the community, which is what this market is here for, and then as tourism comes back, obviously we'll welcome all visitors. But the response has been really great. The community's come on out, they're speaking with their wallets and their dollars, which obviously at the end of the day, we want a great experience, but it needs to be a valuable economic opportunity for the vendors who are coming out.
Opinionated Ottawa icon
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
1011 FM and 1310 AM.
As I said, it's the big local story, the out-of-control post-Panda Game party in Sandy Hill. Susan Khazaeli joins me now, President, Action Sandy Hill. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
And certainly that's where the action was this weekend.
Yes, so everyone has heard.
Yes, I'm sure. I have to ask you, I'm sure you've been gathering reaction from neighbors in the area. What are they telling you about what happened, what unfolded this weekend?
Oh, yes. The community is not happy. We've heard from a lot of residents. Action Sandy Hill has a large membership from Russell Avenue. They feel that obviously the rioting, the nonsense was, first of all, predictable. This sort of thing happens on Russell, year after year with the Panda Games. As always, there's a lot of garbage, trespassing, students, going through private property laneways to circumvent police presence, and that there was purposeful destruction. And so they're not happy. They felt that they were endangered, that their rights to the enjoyment of their property was of course ruined that evening, and they felt that they weren't supported by the police presence that evening.
I understand their frustration is certainly appreciated, but it sounds as though they expect it. Right? They expect it if they live on Russell Avenue. The Panda Game. That means there's going to be Panda parties. But this year was different, right? No doubt about it. This year, way out of hand, right?
This year, the escalation was certainly, as you said, out of hand. But it's not all that new. I believe in 2019 there were some students, and these are young adults, right? We sort of talk about them as students and makes it sound like they're in kindergarten, but these are young adults that should know better. And they'd I guess in 2019 they'd climbed on top of a nearby apartment building and they started jumping off. So there's an expectation of behaviors that are stupid and irresponsible. But this year, there was assault. There was assaulting of residents who'd come out of their homes. They had beer cans thrown at them. They had tree branches wielded and launched at them. So there were people that were injured, I believe also police. 7 people were taken away by paramedics. I understand that the car that was overturned still had the driver in it. I'm not sure.
I saw a tweet to that effect. Yeah, I can't fact check that, obviously. But
and I think they would have set it on fire. So I think now the community is asking, what's next?
Yeah, how much worse can it get, you mean, right? Yeah, how much worse?
Exactly.
Oh, it sounds terrifying. It does sound terrifying. It sounds like they had legitimate reasons to be afraid.
Oh, of course. And I understand that, the residents who did come outside and did try to grab a police attention were told, go back in. There's not much that we can do. We're outnumbered.
And is that what you're hearing about the police response? There are a lot of questions about how the police handled this situation and whether they just maybe underestimated it or were caught off guard, just overwhelmed, I guess, by the numbers, right?
By the number? Well, I think the turnout is always certainly well over 1,000. I believe it was 2,000 people who had congregated along Russell this year. And from the reports, I understand that the police were redeployed elsewhere. So, at one point, one of the residents who wrote to Ash let us know that there were only about 8 officers at one point. And so certainly 8 police officers against 2,000 drunken students who are riled up is certainly ineffective. And unless they're out in large numbers, the police that is, and able to assert themselves, it doesn't take very long for that one drunk student to, cleverly point out to the rest of the mob, hey, we can keep going. They can't do anything to stop us. And certainly the sense from the community is that the students were behaving without any kind of regard or consequence and with impunity.
What should happen now? The mayor is speaking with police officials and counselors. What do you want to see happen here? What are you hearing from people in Sandy Hill? What do they want to see happen here?
Well, I'm hearing two perspectives. One is that we should cancel the Panda Games permanently. The second is that we should think critically about whether we should cancel the Panda Games permanently. So certainly no one wants to see the events that happened this year repeat next year. And they have very, very little trust in, the city, the University of Ottawa in particular, and the Ottawa Police to have appropriate mitigation strategies to prevent it. And frankly, this was an illegal activity. There was no permit authorizing a street party. It is a residential street. So it should never have happened there in the first place.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about Russell Avenue. What kind of street is Russell Avenue in Sandy Hill?
Russell Avenue on Sandy Hill. Russell Avenue certainly has a lot of off-campus housing for students,
okay,
but there are quite a few families and individuals as well who live on that street. So what's happened with last night is that balance has been kind of, I guess, damaged in quite a few ways. I understand from a few people who live along Russell Avenue, they've said that, the police have reached out to talk to them as well as the media, and, they feel that they're almost under observation by these students who only last night were threatening them with violence. So there's a great deal of tension there.
Great deal of tension. Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Thank you for your time, your perspective. We'll see what happens with it.
Yes, we shall see.
All right. Bye-bye. Susan Khazaeli is the president of Action Sandy Hill to get our show going this morning. So still ahead, coming up right after the 9:30 news, it's Andrea Horwath with the speech from the throne. Appears to have concluded now for the Ontario legislature. So I had a chance to speak to Andrea Horwath this morning and get her views on the legislative session to come. And then Barry McLoughlin with senior partner TransformLeaders.ca. We'll talk about pandemonium as well. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, October 4th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's 9 degrees. Here's what's making news this hour. In a speech from the throne outlining plans for the session at Queen's Park includes hiring up to 16,000 personal support workers. The Lieutenant Governor for the province is outlining the government plan for the coming session of the legislature. The province also calling for the federal government to increase the health transfers to all provinces and territories. The president of Action Sandy Hill, the community association in that neighborhood, says the post-Panda game activities were predictable. Residents felt their enjoyment of property was eliminated over this past weekend, and there wasn't enough done to combat the vandalism and the pandemonium. Susan Khazaeli says there are incidents every year, but this year there were residents who felt threatened. Police even admitting to some there wasn't much they could do because they were outnumbered. She says among the possible solutions that some people are suggesting in that neighborhood, cancel future Panda games. The city is hoping the second time's a charm. They've hired a new independent safety investigator after the first one was criticized for being a consultant on the construction of Phase 1 of LRT. In a memo, the city manager says TRA Incorporated, a company based in Philadelphia, will conduct the review of Confederation Line. City News Time, 9:31. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
The Ontario Legislature getting back at it today with a speech from the throne this morning. So let's talk about it. We have the leader of the opposition here in Ontario, Andrea Horwath, the leader of Ontario's New Democrats. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
It's great to hear from you. So I should tell the listeners we're speaking actually before the speech from the throne, which is happening at 9 o'clock this morning. So what would you like to hear today in this speech?
Well, what we want to see is an about-face from Doug Ford. No more bad choices and big cuts. Let's recognize that this is a time for dealing with some of the aftermath of a pandemic that's still with us, right? And so we have problems that we have to address, and we want to see the government indicate that they have a plan to do that. So things like hiring thousands of more nurses and personal support workers and other healthcare professionals and retaining them. We need to make sure that schools are safer. It's heartbreaking to watch as schools have to send cohorts home, have to shut down, have to send kids back home again after so much time out of school. It's terrible for the kids, and it's really stressful for the parents. We want to see mandated vaccines, something that should have happened a long time ago in healthcare and in education, because those folks are working with our most vulnerable, the kids that can't get vaccines, as well as sick and struggling people in terms of their health. We want to see more help for small business, something that I was shocked that Doug Ford wasn't prepared to do, a third round of grants to help keep them on their feet. And of course, we've called for safety zones to try to protect hospitals and businesses from those organized, rowdy, vitriolic, anti-public health protesters.
Okay, so that's a long list. Well,
you know what? It's a throne speech. It's supposed to be aspirational.
Sure. Yeah, aspirational. Yeah. So let's dig a little deeper into each one of those then. So specifically for the healthcare system right now, what would you like to see there? Just a little more specifically, please. So.
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, I think that people have clearly been listening to the concern coming from our healthcare providers, and this is people who range from doctors to PSWs to technicians and everybody in between. People are leaving healthcare in droves. They're burnt out, they're exhausted, and they're insulted by a government that put a bill in place, Bill 124, that's kept their wages to a 1% increase on an annual basis. Particularly, I'm talking about nurses and other healthcare workers. So the issue becomes how do we retain people who are already leaving in droves when we are telling them we don't value them and we're not paying them adequately. This is a long-standing problem, particularly with nurses, though, Rob. It's something that the Liberals didn't address, and nurses were sounding the alarm bells for many years as well with that government, that they needed to put in place a plan, because the other piece is that nurses are also aging. The average age of nurses is increasing significantly, and we need to renew that profession. With PSWs, of course, everybody has seen. We call them heroes, but don't do anything to make sure they get the kind of permanent increase to their wages, as well as benefits, as well as working conditions. So there's a lot that needs to be done in that sector.
Right.
And with the schools, again, it's something that should have been done last summer. We still are hearing that there are schools that don't have proper ventilation. We still see that parents are complaining about classrooms where kids are, 30 to a classroom, where they're literally having to turn sideways to shimmy between the rows of desks because there isn't enough room, and we've seen what that does, right? It creates an environment where COVID can thrive, and that's not a good thing.
All right.
So there are lots of pieces that the government needs to look at.
Sure. I want to ask you, though, about this bill. Bill 124 was kind of a spending restraint bill for the broader public services, I understand. It predates the pandemic, right? It came in before the pandemic, right?
It did, and
right?
it's now in the courts.
So what would you do with it? What would you do with it?
I wouldn't
repeal it, or
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have put Bill 124 in place in the first place.
Right.
It's not legal to do that. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to get into the weeds with all of this stuff, but at the end of the day, this will go through the courts. The unions will probably win. They always have. This is a political thing that every government does. The Liberals did it. The Conservatives are doing it, and it doesn't work. At the end of the day, they might get some kudos from their base, but we'll end up having to pay the price, not only in terms of the court costs, but in terms of the negativity that our public sector workers feel from their employer, which is the government. But also, we will have to pay the back wages anyways, and so it really is a folly. But it's used as a political tool, and shamefully, that has created even a worse situation here in Ontario with the pandemic at hand.
Okay, what specifically would you like to hear about long-term care? Apparently, there should be some information about plans about shoring up the long-term care system in Ontario. What would you like to see as the leader of the New Democrats?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, Rob, and I'd encourage people, if they're interested in this particularly, and I know a lot of people are because of the horrifying situations that occurred through the second and third wave particularly, I guess the first and second wave particularly. But we put a platform piece together that we released last year, almost a year ago now, as a matter of fact, and it's pretty comprehensive. It speaks to making sure that we get the profits out of long-term care, and home care, frankly, that we create environments that are much more family-oriented. So let's not keep warehousing people in these facilities that are not home-like at all. We want to make sure that we have a proper amount of staffing, that the staff is appropriately compensated, so that we don't have the kind of situation where people are having to cobble together 2 and 3 jobs at different long-term care homes in order to be able to put a roof over their own families' heads. There's a lot of work to be done in long-term care, and I suspect that this government is not going to do that work. We know for sure they don't want to get the profits out of long-term care because their friends are the ones that operate these homes for profit. What we know for sure is that instead of protecting the families and standing up for the families and giving them justice, Doug Ford protected the government and these private operators from lawsuits and accountability from the way that they allowed people to become, basically to lose their lives and to become extremely unwell with COVID-19. And so there's a lot of work to be done. And look, I will say this is not, this didn't get here all of a sudden. It didn't come with COVID. What happened is COVID pulled back the curtain on what was happening in long-term care. But for many years now, we've been advocating for people to get what they deserve, and seniors to get the dignity and quality of life that they deserve with the Liberal government. And they didn't do anything but cut and squeeze, just like the Conservatives did as well.
Okay, I want to ask you, as of this morning, it's almost 87% of people over the age of 18 in the province of Ontario. 87% have had one dose, 82% fully vaccinated. Seems to be pretty good numbers in Ontario. Do you give the government any credit for its management of the vaccination rollout, Andrea Horwath?
Well, Rob, I give Ontarians all kinds of credit for stepping up and doing the right thing and for encouraging their family members to do the right thing. I know that there have been many barriers along the way, and I think there still are some barriers that prevent people from having that access. I want to congratulate the public health departments because they're the ones that, without much guidance and or assistance from the provincial government, went ahead and found the ways to reduce some of those barriers. But no, look, the government dragged its feet through this entire pandemic. They were never addressing it in an urgent way. And when it came to vaccines, people can't forget that the significant hotspots that we had in Ontario, in GTA, but in other parts of the province as well, other urban centers, the government didn't do what was being asked of them for weeks. So for weeks and weeks they waited before they put strategies in place to boost up the number of vaccines to be made available particularly to those frontline workers that were keeping our economy going. So that was the problem. I think it's really clear that the government could have acted more quickly when it came to those kinds of initiatives and paid sick days as well. I mean, they at the end of the day eventually put 3 paid sick days in place, but I can tell you I've talked to a lot of workers who've told me that they tried to access those paid sick days when they weren't well and they needed to get a test, and they were told by their employer, well, we haven't set that up yet. We haven't had a chance to set that up. And so really the paid sick days didn't really happen all that well in Ontario, and they were nowhere near what people needed to be able to take the time off to get the test and to isolate if necessary. What we wanted was 14 paid, government paid sick days, not business paid sick days, but government paid sick days. In the face of a global pandemic, it's what people needed to be able to get well and not spread the virus. So yeah, there's a lot of problems with how the government dealt with it. People were looking for vaccines. We were calling it the Hunger Games. I mean, people who were not involved with government put together apps to try to help people find a vaccine. And these are all failures of the Ford government.
All right. I want to ask you not so much about the throne speech, but about one of the members here from Eastern Ontario, Randy Hillier, who's an independent, and some of his the language of some of his tweets and your reaction as a leading member of our legislature. He tweeted recently, on Monday when the Ontario legislature reopens, people should bring a pot of boiling hot tar and a case of feathers, for example. Each politician who arrives deserves both a tar and feathering. That was one of his tweets. Another one of his tweets. If your country was under siege, your family threatened, your freedoms removed, would you stand and fight? Would you bear arms? Good golly. Andrea Horwath, as a leading member of our legislature, what do you say to this from a fellow member of the legislature here?
It's absolutely despicable. It is despicable. It is irresponsible, and it's frightening that somebody with an elected position would basically incite violence against people who are also members of the Legislative Assembly who might have different opinions than him, but that's the whole point of a democracy. We don't turn to arms, and we don't tar and feather, and we don't incite violence. We debate, and we come up with the decisions. The people of Ontario voted in the election. They'll be voting very soon, come June of next year, and that's how our democracy functions. But the idea that elected people are so irresponsible as to tweet out those kinds of messages is it's the kind of thing that leads to what we saw happen in the U.S. on Capitol Hill.
Okay. Thank you, Andrea Horwath. I always appreciate your time. Thank you again.
My pleasure as always, Rob. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Returns with Barry McLoughlin. He's here every Monday morning. Senior partner, TransformLeaders.ca. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. Like pandemonium. Don't you think that's a perfect Ottawa Sun headline? Don't you think so? Pandemonium.
Of course it is.
Yeah. Let's talk about this wild panda game after party. How do you think officials are handling this?
Well, I mean, right now they're in their condemnation mode. So from the mayor, councillors, police, the University of Ottawa. So they're starting off on the right foot here. I don't think they can afford to treat this as, too many people, we don't want to get into all that legal stuff, turn the page. No, I think there has to be consequences for this behavior. I think that the police need to be looked at in terms of their response to it. I mean, we are the nation's capital. We've had lots of major demonstrations in Ottawa, and we should know how to handle a street party of 2,000 people. We ought to know how to deal with that. It looked to most people, from what I saw, that the police took an approach which was to underreact, not to provoke any further. But I think that just seemed to encourage them. When you have video of police standing right beside a car that is overturned and burning, that's not good. It shows that they're, what this reminds me of? I think it was a G8 back at Queen's Park, literally, a decade ago. Everybody forgets that on the Saturday, it was a Saturday and Sunday double day event. On the Saturday, the police underreacted. They allowed cars to be turned over, set on fire, and they were criticized for not reacting enough. The next day, they were criticized for overreacting. And in fact, the legal cases went on for a couple of years after that.
Yes, they did.
So I have to say that, getting the strategy right at the police, we depend on them to know how to deal with these things. Just to close off the two ends of the street and stand by while they're doing it, I don't think is one of the options that Ottawans think is the right approach.
Yeah. A lot of questions about police response, I think, Barry. We just had a spokesperson on from one of the community associations in Sandy Hill. They counted 8 police officers. I mean, if there's 8 police officers for a crowd of 2,000, what could they do, right? Well,
this is a...
Call in backup, I guess. Call for backup.
I mean, as somebody that teaches at universities and is a fellow at another one, I would say this, that this is a generating character opportunity for students. I think they should be invited to come forward, self-identify, and that would be important, because if down the road charges are laid and it said you had an opportunity to come forward, identify yourself, and you didn't, that's an important turning point. I think they should be invited to do so, and I think some of these young people would surprise you. Say, I'll self-identify. I was there. I probably shouldn't have been. Let's start with that. And there are many.
So if I'm one of these students and my mug is over the supper hour newscast, or on the front page of the paper, or whatever the case might be, you would say your best course of action is to fess up.
Well, yes, it's to come in and say, yes, that was me. Because let's face it, this thing was so massively done almost for Instagram, apparently, certainly for social media. Eventually, they're going to get enough video. It might take them a long time, but they'll get enough. And when you're identified and you had a chance to come forward, I think it's important to the court. I also think that there are avenues in which you won't have a criminal record. You would be on best behavior for a year, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But there has to be consequences.
Okay. Yeah, this statement from the officials at the University of Ottawa. Out of control street parties should never be a feature of life at U Ottawa. Well.
By the way, I'm not going to blame them, but Ottawa paid $200,000 to the Ottawa Police Force, apparently, to do policing in the pregame event at the arena. And so basically, they knew there was going to be a big crowd. Actually, apparently 90% were great. They shuttled on over to it, and that part of it worked. But it appears to be no planning for the postgame.
For the after party,
The after party, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's move along. Mr. Trudeau has now apologized to a First Nations near Kamloops for not attending any event associated with the very first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. There was widespread talk about widespread condemnation for this. The Prime Minister instead going to one of his favorite vacation spots, Tofino, British Columbia, in a very nice beachfront villa, right? $18 million place, apparently. Very, very nice. The best money can buy, I guess. Instead of attending any event anywhere in the country for the very first day of Truth and Reconciliation, but now he's done his mea culpa. What do you think?
Well, I mean, most of Justin Trudeau's real kind of embarrassing things were all self-inflicted. You know, his own choices. His choice was not to post where he was really going. Apparently, he was still in Ottawa in private meetings. To mislead the media in that was, that can't be an accident. He decides not to even attend even a quick ceremony there in Tofino. Apparently, there was several. So instead, he tries to cover it up. He's done this a number of times now. I think it really damages him on a file that we were all led to believe is the single most important file, before him. And he's made great progress in raising issues for First Nations, and we have to believe that is genuine. But for him to do it, especially on this issue, it is really, really surprising. And I think it's got to be damaging to his brand. I think he owes Canadians an apology. He should do it today. He should apologize, not just to the one chief that had invited him, but I think he owes it to First Nations. He owes it to Canadians, and to be genuine, remorseful about it. I think that's critically important to do.
Okay. Not just to First Nations, but to the country at large.
Yeah,
to the country
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, interesting. The legislature's back in session. We've had the throne speech already, and throne speeches are all about aspirations and ceremony, but now we will be into the fiercely partisan stuff, and an election campaign soon thereafter. So, right now, how would you handicap Ontario's kind of election standings? What kind of chance do you give Doug Ford, for example, at re-election?
Well, this is going to be a very hard-fought campaign. I mean, Stephen DeLuca, most people in Ontario don't know who he is. He's not really made the kind of impact that I think a lot of Liberals would want him to make. That could change, of course, but so far we haven't seen a lot of that. And part of that, of course, because of COVID, he hasn't been able to really get out there. Andrea Horwath is a very well-known commodity. People think what they think of her. She's very genuine in her beliefs. That comes across. But it's somewhat limited. However, as we saw in Alberta, things can shift wildly.
Yeah.
And that could happen in Ontario. So I think the speech from the throne is an opportunity to turn the page, to look forward, to develop the themes that are going to take you into the next election next spring. This is really important to do. For the Premier, he has to continue making progress so that we don't have a repetition by the spring of any of this COVID. That's a hard thing to guarantee. He's got to get on the economic platform in a really strong, compelling way. So we know what's happening going forward. There's a lot of damage to the economy. And so I think that this is his chance to truly chart a fresh course, and he needs a refresh. He needs a reboot.
Right.
This is his chance.
Right. Big reset, a chance for a reset kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Very interesting, Barry. As always on a Monday morning, we thank you so much for your insight.
Yeah, my pleasure, Rob.
Yeah, bye. Barry McLoughlin from TransformLeaders.ca, where he is senior partner. So, still ahead on our program, as mentioned, Stephen Del Duca is the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party as we continue to cover today's throne speech and give you the layout of Ontario politics right now. The week's big business stories with David Sali from the Ottawa Business Journal. That's still ahead. And Geoffrey Johnston, international affairs columnist with the Kingston Whig-Standard. We will talk about the Pandora Papers, a big news story in the mix today. But coming up next, it's the Talkback Hour and your phone calls, your reaction to the out-of-control Panda Game Party in Sandy Hill and Doug Ford's political future. 750-1310 right after the news here on City News.
in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, October 4th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 9 degrees. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. City of Ottawa has hired a new independent rail safety advisor. The firm TRA has been tasked with reviewing what went wrong with Confederation Line and what needs to be done to get the service back up and running. The firm is based in Philadelphia. It had no prior experience with the city or anyone involved in construction of the LRT, something that was an issue with the last city hire. TRA will be on site today to begin their preliminary assessment. Here's your forecast for the day with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Rather mixed conditions for us today. Some sunny breaks, slight chance of showers too, and a brisk wind out of the east. The high about 15. Tonight, cloudy, slight chance of showers and 11. For today, the high 15.
And right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, it's 9 degrees. The president of Action Sandy Hill, the community association for that neighborhood, says the post-Panda Game activities were predictable based on history. Residents felt their enjoyment of their property was eliminated at a point over the weekend, and there wasn't enough done to combat the vandalism and the pandemonium. Susan Khazaeli says it doesn't take much for a situation like that to get out of control.
It doesn't take very long for that one drunk student to, cleverly point out to the rest of the mob, hey, we can keep going. They can't do anything to stop us. And certainly the sense from the community is that the students were behaving without any kind of regard or consequence and with impunity.
Now, she says among the possible solutions, some are suggesting just cancel future Panda Games. City News Time, 10:02. The speech from the throne wrapped up the opening up the final session of the legislature before a scheduled June election has now wrapped up, and City News Queen's Park reporter Richard Southern has the details.
This was meant to be a reset for the Ford government 8 months ahead of the June election. In actual fact, though, the 7-page speech from the throne was more of a rehash, just reiterating what the government has done during the pandemic. We really didn't hear a lot of new ideas or new promises in this speech, which has just wrapped up here at Queen's Park, with one exception perhaps, how the government plans to grow the economy out of the pandemic. Here's Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Dodswell.
Your government remains steadfast in its commitment to an economic and fiscal recovery that is fueled by economic growth, not painful tax hikes or spending cuts. To do so, your government will build Ontario, build roads and highways, build and expand transit to communities across the province.
Certainly a big pre-election promise there, no new tax hikes or spending cuts. The speech also focused on avoiding future lockdowns. It said if additional public health measures are needed, they will, quote, be localized and targeted. Reporting live at Queen's Park, Richard Southern.
City News Time, 10:03. Pope Francis, the Archbishop of Canterbury, dozens of imams, rabbis, and other religious leaders have signed a joint appeal to governments to commit to ambitious targets at the UN Climate Conference. This is the latest initiative to rally momentum and outrage ahead of the summit scheduled for later this month in Glasgow. Experts say it's a make-or-break chance to curb greenhouse emissions. The appeal states, quote, "We have inherited a garden. We must not leave a desert to our children." I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
I'd love to hear from you this morning and gather your reaction and your opinions on what should happen next given the wild and crazy post-Panda Game party in Sandy Hill over the weekend. Nothing. These are just students blowing off steam. They're just blowing off steam. And it's an opinion that's out there. Panda Game parties happen every year. And okay, maybe this year things got a little bit out of hand, but the only time a Panda Game party makes the news is once a year right after the Panda Game party, and then everybody moves along. Do you want the book thrown at these students? That's certainly an opinion out there. These are supposed to be the leaders of tomorrow. Stop treating them like kids who are just blowing off steam. They are young adults who should know better. They're old enough to know better. The university is denouncing this behavior, so if that's the case, there should be consequences. Consequences like suspensions from school, expulsions from school, even criminal charges, okay? Faces are all over the internet. I'm sure some of these people will be identified, and then they'll have to face the music. What do you think? What do you think? What about the police response? Now, I wasn't there. I'm not an eyewitness. It seems like the police, though, from what we heard from our spokesperson from Action Sandy Hill, it sounds like they were totally overwhelmed by the size of the crowd and understaffed, I guess, for a party that size. Again, I wasn't there, but it sounds as though they cordoned off the street, and then the students were basically allowed to do whatever it is they wanted to do, and run riot. Run riot. Total impunity is one of the quotes in the paper this morning. So what do you think about that? Should we cancel the Panda game? Cancel the Panda game and be done with it. No more Panda games, and there won't be any more post-Panda game parties like this. What do you think? And again, I make an appeal to people who live in Sandy Hill. Okay. If you reside in the Sandy Hill area, and if you have any information to share, if you have eyewitness accounts that will shed some light on what happened this weekend, just tell David, hey, I'm a resident of Sandy Hill, and this is my information. Can I please get on the air, David, to bump you right to the front of the line, okay? Or if you're a student at the University of Ottawa, you can shed some light on what went down on Russell Avenue this weekend. Love to hear from you this morning. That's why we do the Talk Back Hour. We love those firsthand accounts, those eyewitness news accounts. Eyewitness News, Rob Snow Show, 750-1310 here on City News, okay? Let's get to some calls. Kathleen in Ottawa. Good morning, Kathleen.
Yes, Rob.
Hi, Kathleen.
I'm sorry. I get a little nervous when I have to call you or when I want to call you.
Okay, I'm glad you called me. So,
but this is disgusting
behavior, yes.
Behavior for these people. Now, as you said, they're supposed to be the future and bright of they're supposed
the leaders
to be
of tomorrow.
Of the future.
Yes.
Where are their brains? And also, the parents are paying for this, or they're paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that now maybe some of these students could be there on a scholarship. Well, how about canceling their scholarship?
Okay.
And the other thing is, how many of the alma mater older people joined into this crowd?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but
No.
You're saying if they're a beneficiary of like student aid, for example, like a scholarship, then maybe they should lose that privilege or something like that.
Right. I mean,
the point being, Kath, you want there to be consequences, right? You want them to suffer some consequences.
They damaged someone's car.
Oh, yes, I guess they did. Yes, they tore the thing apart. Apparently they tried to set it on fire.
Right.
But they couldn't get it to ignite, mercifully.
Right.
Can you imagine if a car blows up in the middle of that crowd?
And
they were trying to get fire trucks down there in the middle of that mess? Holy mackerel.
What else could have happened? But as I said,
could have been terrible.
There has to be some consequences. Now, the other thing is that, for example, go back to the hockey situation where Alan Rock canceled the whole program for the next year.
That's right. Yes.
And then eventually, when everything went all through the courts, there was basically nothing that was none of the charges stuck.
Oh yes.
But then again, that ruined some of the hockey players' careers.
They left school and everything. Yeah, you're right. Kathleen.
I mean, this is
long memory. Yeah.
This is just unacceptable.
Unacceptable. Gotcha, Kathleen. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Yep. She wants some consequences, so there you go. We're into it now. 750-1310. 750-1310. The out-of-control Panda Game Party is our topic right now here on the Talkback Hour on the Rob Snow Show. Bob, you're on City News. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning.
Yes, sir. You live in Sandy Hill, do you?
Yes, we do.
I'm very glad to hear from you this morning, sir.
The problem is much bigger than this, but let's concentrate on the Panda Game.
Sure, okay.
And first of all, as I was saying, when I was in university in the 60s, there was even a song about these kinds of actions. It was called Moments to Remember, and one of the lines goes, "The day we tore the goalpost down." And I can remember after a football game tearing down the goalpost. Now, the University of Toronto was pretty smart. They put up metal ones the next year that you couldn't tear down. Okay. But I'd like to read my statement.
Yes, Bob.
Okay, am I allowed to do that?
You go right ahead, Bob. Read your statement, yes.
Okay. I think what really went wrong on Saturday was the rain in the morning when the kids usually do the street party. Then Ottawa won, and as the weather cleared, the kids could let go. I think another factor was getting out after COVID isolation. Even we 80-year-olds socialized more this weekend. In 2019, I was so annoyed by the morning Panda event that I went over to help the police, and help in quotation marks. I found that their presence, including a supervisor in a police vehicle, kept a moderating tone. As the students exited the area, the police took away any liquor they were still carrying. 99% of the students were nice and polite. One fellow tore down a stop sign. As I took his picture for the local newspaper, I mentioned that employers may not look favorably on this. His companions bundled him away quickly. This was the only vandalism that I saw that day in 2019. After the students had left to go to the game, I helped with the cleanup. It became evident that the local residents recognized a bonanza as they carefully collected the discarded bottles and cans which had deposits. Many were still quite full, as I had noticed many of the young girls pretending to be part of the group, but not drinking that much. Yesterday afternoon in the block on Rissel, I talked with two men who had huge garbage containers full of recyclable bottles. Yes, they said, they were going to get good value for their work. The street looked pretty clean. As for COVID resocialization, I was embarrassed the other night to find myself on the street loudly saying goodbye to friends after a delightful dinner with ample wine. Fortunately, it was not 2 a.m, but in the old days of youth, it might have been.
Well, thank you, Bob, for your statement. That's a great statement, Bob, and I appreciate it. Do you have anything you want to add to it, Bob?
Well, the whole neighborhood has changed.
Okay.
We are expecting, like many of the houses here, that our house will just be bulldozed.
I see. Right.
And a 4-story rooming house effectively put up for students, because that's what people can make money on, and it goes along with what the city wants. They want intensification.
Right.
But no, I think based on my experience working with the police, I think they did their best. And that day in 2019, they were really strapped because there was a major demonstration on the Hill. They had to police Carleton, the Carleton area, students areas, and they had to police Sandy Hill. So the fact that they can keep these kids sort of within one block, it's not like, I have pictures too of, I don't know whether you're aware, but the police have a tank. And one day there was a student uprising on Russell in that same block, and they brought the tank. That's the first time I've seen it used in a neighborhood.
Okay.
Now, you don't know what it's like here in Sandy Hill, but 90% of the kids are good, and they're trying hard.
All right, Bob. Thank you for your call, sir. Thank you. Just a great call. Great call. And I suspect he's bang on about the changing nature of not just Sandy Hill, but all kinds of so-called mature neighborhoods in the capital like that. On 10:15, 750-1310, we're talking pandemonium on the Rob Snow Show Talkback Hour. This is City News.
So the birth of absinthe was 2002, I think, 2003, and I was working at Urban Bistro, happily, where Allium is now. And then the space where Holland Cafe was came up. It's on the corner of Spencer and Holland. And I spoke to the landlord, and there's a lot of interest from a lot of other people, but he and I just, got along super well, and he put a lot of faith in me. So Carmen Turner is his name. He gave me the lease to the place and really pretty much gave me all the equipment in the place. I was really lucky. I've been really lucky with landlords that way, actually, both my current landlord and Carmen Turner. Because if there hadn't been Carmen Turner, there wouldn't have been Absinthe. So we were there for a few years and just sort of outgrew the place. And then now we're here. It's obviously been tough, and it's been tough for everyone. I mean, that's been the big democratic sweep of in restaurants and the hospitality and the arts that we were talking about earlier. It's like everybody's been impacted pretty much the same. From everybody that I talked to, we're down 75, 80%. We're climbing out now. I think one of the saddest things is everybody, we went down to 2 employees from 25, and we're now at 4, and we're bringing 2 new people on this week, so we'll be at 6. So it's little steps. So it's been tough. It's I've got the most expensive clubhouse ever here, because some days you come and you don't do any business, but you're here. But I'm grateful for what I do have. I think everybody's optimistic now, not necessarily just about the vaccine, but about the vaccine, spring, being able to be outside. I think you're going to see a lot of pop-up things happen in parking lots and on sidewalks and like that, rather than being actually inside somebody's commerce. I think we'd like to take it outside. I know my staff would. My staff like the outdoors now, all of a sudden, all 4 of us. 6 soon. But we'll be doing stuff, some business in the patio in the parking lot, and we have a patio out front. And I think I hope other restaurants and stores will do the same. I hope that they take advantage of the sidewalk and doing sort of, guerrilla marketing and stuff like that, and really shaking it up a bit. You can find us at Absinthe Cafe at 1208 Wellington Street West in Hintonburg, and you can find us online at absinthecafe.ca.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
There's kind of 4 major angles of the story that seem to be emerging when it comes to the Panda Game riot. One is they're just kids blowing off steam, and Panda Game parties are nothing new, and there's nothing to see here. There are wild and crazy parties every year in Sandy Hill to coincide with the Panda Game, and this one got carried away, but in the end, we'll tune in next year and the next Panda Game and Panda Game party. Another one is enough. No more Panda Games. You don't want wild and crazy Panda Game parties? Well, there's an easy solution for that, and the solution is we'll not have the Panda Game anymore. And people like Bob in Sandy Hill and people who live around TD Place where the game is held, why should they have to go through this every year anyway? The public urination, defecation, drunkenness, debauchery. If officials, really want to send a message, then cancel or at the very least, at least suspend the Panda Game. Okay? Until everyone involved can learn how to act like responsible citizens and grown-ups. So that's it. That's another one. Okay? How would you react to that? At 750-1310. No more Panda Games. A lot of question about the police response. Were they overwhelmed? How could they not be overwhelmed? There were 2,000, the estimate is 2,000 people on Russell Avenue. How are you not overwhelmed by that? Russell Avenue is like just a residential street in Sandy Hill. maybe 8 police there acting more or less as traffic control. I suppose you could have 100 police officers, 200 police officers, but what kind of chance do you give them against a crowd of 2,000 people? What could they possibly do, right? So there we go, 750-1310, 750-1310. Murray in Ottawa. Murray.
Yeah, good morning, Rob.
Yeah, good morning, Murray.
With all of our brilliant young Canadians that we're sending off to university, all prim and proper, where's their student union reps here? Why isn't the student union saying and reaching out this morning to everybody that was there and those that weren't there, saying, hey, folks, send out a tweet. We're going to meet you down at Russell and such corner, and we're going to hand out garbage bags. This is your opportunity to do some public relation and get out there and clean it up.
Make amends. Make some amends, right?
Yeah, forget about banning the games and calling in more cops. And, it's like banning a hammer because you hit your thumb driving a nail. Knock it off. Get out there and be responsible. You're young adults. Get out there. None of us have ever woken up the morning after without a regret. So it's time to make amends. Get out there and, make yourself visible.
All right. Good point, Murray. Good point. All right. Thank you.
Right on.
Yep. Right on. Yeah. Regrets. I've had a few. Mark in Ottawa South. Mark.
Well, some things are unforgivable.
Is this one of them?
No, not quite.
Okay.
But the first thing to do is to identify the perpetrators and isolate them. I wouldn't want to see the Panda game canceled because the great majority of attendees do not engage in this activity.
Right. Okay.
Secondly, these are not kids. They're young adults. You're old enough to be trusted to drive a car. You're old enough to know better than to damage one or to try to set it on fire. Thirdly, and this is where it's interesting to see how the university will react to this. Suppose the situation was different. The people who did the damage were completely nonviolent, did no vandalism, but shouted out the N-word publicly. What would be the university and the media reaction to that? I think they would rush to disassociate themselves with them to the maximum degree, to disown them.
Sure.
There would be no equivocating.
Right.
But when you do that,
are they equivocating here, do you think? Are they equivocating here? Is there equivocation?
I'm not sure yet. I haven't.
Well, I guess we'll see, right? It's only been a couple of days.
It's too early to see what their reaction
early,
is. But I believe, though, it would be faster and more immediate had it been the kind of act I described.
All right, okay.
What is symbolized politically as opposed to the actual physical damage is done.
Yes, okay. All right. Yep. Okay, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Okay. And one more at 750-1310. Mike, Ottawa, on the Panda game pandemonium.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, Mike.
So I just want to give a different perspective. I looked at what happened, and I was really disgusted.
Okay.
I'm 36 years old, and I think back half my life ago, I was downtown Toronto at 18, rocking buses and helping to flip cars after Team Canada won the Olympics in hockey. And I hate to think that, my life now would be, ruined from one night of, the mob mentality and just trying to have fun and being stupid. I would hate to have some kids, their lives are ruined because of that. But I do think there should be consequences.
So what do consequences look like then? What do consequences look like then?
Well, I'm surprised in the moment. I mean, maybe the police wanted to de-escalate, but I'm surprised they didn't go in there with, pepper spray. Maybe they're worried that the crowd will turn on them. So I see that. But I really think something needs to happen with the Panda game. I worked at Lansdowne for many years, and I was there while people were peeing or pissing, I should say, in my store, in a grocery store. Just crazy things that were happening around Lansdowne. And I was glad they kind of put a stop to a lot of that. But now it seems like the party's moved. I don't know what they need to do, but something needs to be done just to quell the madness.
Quell the madness. All right, Mike. Thank you. Thank you. Again, we can pick it up after the 11:30 news, or we can move on to other things because it is a big day in politics because the Ontario legislature is back. But I'm asking a whole bunch of questions about this Panda game because there have been big Panda game parties in the past, but and maybe it's the scene of this car being flipped all over, and it's all over social media, and now there are reports that they tried to light the thing on fire. acting with impunity, police nowhere to be found. Should there be consequences for any of this? For the students who took part in all of this, these leaders of tomorrow, what should happen to them? The mayor says he's disgusted by the idiocy. The top brass at the University of Ottawa say they're outraged. The police say they have several investigations happening right now. So what should happen, if anything, to the people who took part in all of this? I honestly can't remember ever seeing anything like it in all my years of covering some pretty wild events here in Ottawa. A party like this, nothing like it. So should there be any consequences? Do you want suspensions? Do you want expulsions? If it comes to it, criminal charges. What do reparations look like? You want to throw the book at a 21-year-old or a 22-year-old? Car tipped over. Someone on Twitter, there's someone inside that car. Now, that was tipped over by that mop. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Our spokesperson from Action Sandy Hill said she heard the same thing, that somebody may have been in the car when they tipped it. I have no way of knowing that. But I did see someone tweet that over the weekend. There were people hurt. Residents getting stuff thrown at them. Police getting hurt. Could have turned really bad really fast. Can you imagine if someone did really try to light that car on fire and that car explodes and there's 2,000 people on the street? It's like a bomb going off. And I can understand why residents in Sandy Hill would say, why do we put up with this every year? Why do we have to put up with this every year? And maybe we shouldn't have a panda game anymore. If this is what happens because there's a panda game, total disregard for neighbors in the community, then you know what? Let's not have the panda game anymore. Rob Snow Show, 750-1310. This is City News.
1310 AM.
It's Monday, October 4th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 10 degrees, 11 in Smiths Falls, and here's what's making news this hour. It's a rehash of what has been said. It sums up the speech from the throne. The Lieutenant Governor outlining more health care hires by spring in Ontario, and a repeated call for the federal government to add more to health care funding. The speech says that the ultimate goal is to avoid any future COVID-related lockdowns, and if any additional public health measures are needed, they would be localized and targeted. On the COVID front today, 511 more cases in Ontario today and 2 additional deaths. The province says there are 46 more cases in Ottawa, 9 in Eastern Ontario, 3 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 1 new case in Renfrew. Of the over 23,600 tests that were done for these numbers, 2% came back positive. The City of Ottawa has hired a new independent rail safety advisor. The firm TRA has been tasked with reviewing what went wrong with Confederation Line and what needs to be done to fix it. The firm is based in Philadelphia, has no prior experience with the city or anything to do with the LRT so far. TRA will begin their inspection on site today. City News Time, 10:31. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back.
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Okay, so we've talked about the Panda game. Maybe talked too much about the Panda game and the party after the Panda game. So let's get into Ontario politics right now with this question at 750-1310, 750-1310. But if you still want to talk about the Panda game party, we can still talk about the Panda game party. It's always a wild party here during the Talk Back Hour at 750-1310. Right now, it's like my birthday, and I've invited the whole neighborhood, and nobody showed up. Okay. Maybe the firefighters can come and do a drive-by and cheer me up. Does Doug Ford deserve to be reelected, in your opinion? 8 months. I know it's 8 months, but the election campaign will be well underway before that. It kind of unofficially starts today with this throne speech. But think about the last 3 years and a little bit that you've been living, whether you wanted to or not, whether you expected to or not, that you have been living in Ford Nation. Do you think he deserves another 4 years? How do you answer that question? Does he deserve to be reelected given the job he's done over the last 3 years? If you voted for Doug Ford and the PCs in the last election, do you plan on voting for them again in the next election? June 2nd of next year. 750-1310. 750-1310. 613-750-1310. It's the Ford government in the spotlight now. Okay? The legislature is back. There has been the speech from the throne, and we will soon be into an all-out, drag-him-out election campaign. Does Doug Ford deserve another 4 years, in your opinion, as Premier of Ontario, given the job that he's done since taking office? And keeping in mind that half of that time is being consumed with the job of handling a global health crisis and handling the pandemic. I'd love to know what way you lean on that one this morning. Let's face it, it's not going to be as easy for Doug Ford and the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario next time around as it was last time around. The last Ontario election was what I call a throw the bums out election. Okay. Change election. Not only a change, it was like throw the bums out. The voters of Ontario had seen quite about enough. After 15 years of Liberal government, they had seen quite enough of Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne, and they wanted change. And they tossed the Liberals to the curb. I mean, throw the bums out. They threw almost every one of them, save 7 of them out. Worst loss for the Ontario Liberal Party since Confederation. They weren't even an official party anymore. They went from having a majority government to not even having official party status. Kathleen Wynne was lucky enough to hold on to her old seat in Don Valley. And I remember the election night rolled around. I turned on CTV News, and CTV News called it PCs 15 minutes after the polls closed. It's not going to be that easy next year for the Ontario PCs. And when I think back to when the Ford government first took over, got off to a fast start. You remember legislature had a kind of a quick summer session to pluck a lot of the low-hanging fruit. Things like getting rid of the Hydro Board of Directors. They canceled all those green energy contracts. But then the first budget came out, and even though it was the biggest spending budget in Ontario's history, it landed with a thud, and all heck broke loose in the news media. There was a daily barrage of news stories. This is a cruel government, a heartless government, a budget filled with cuts that hurt kids. It was one after another, one news story after another about cuts here and there, and look, I found some more cuts here, and look, under here, there's some more cuts over here, and look at all the cuts on this page. And it resulted in a cabinet shuffle. And the Minister of Finance, Vic Fedeli, was moved out of that portfolio. Then he was replaced by Rod Phillips. You remember Rod Phillips, the guy who went on the Christmas vacation? Where'd he go? He went to St. Bart's. That's right, David. He went to St. Bart's. Like an exclusive getaway place, right? Like if you have enough money to be in the Pandora Papers, you can Christmas vacation in St. Bart's, I bet.
Too fancy for even Justin Trudeau, I think. Too exclusive.
The thing was, it wasn't even that he was in St. Bart's. It was that he was pretending that he wasn't in St. Bart's. He was I'm in Ontario, and here I am. I'm sipping my eggnog, and here's my fireplace with candy canes and snowmen. I'll never forget that. So he got tossed, and now the finance minister he's kind of a straight shooter, Peter Bethlenfalvy. But still, that's 3 finance ministers in 3 years for Doug Ford, right? Not supposed to be like a revolving door in the finance minister's office. And he said you were the little guy and you were going to save money under his government. You're going to save money on gasoline. Well, gasoline is $1.40 a liter around the corner here. You would save money on your hydro bill, 12% you would save on your hydro bill. If anyone is saving any kind of money on their hydro bill, it's only because you're subsidizing it through your income taxes now. It's just the same kind of stupid shell game that we had under the Liberals. And he said he would promise he would end hallway health care. Big promise, big talking point from the premier, but the situation with health care just became totally consumed by the pandemic. Anyway, I've talked enough. I want to hear how you feel about Doug Ford this morning, because, as I said, this is the unofficial start of the election campaign, this throne speech today. Rebecca, Smith Falls. Rebecca.
Hi, Rob. I think that I would re-elect Rob Ford.
Doug Ford, Doug Ford. Yeah.
Doug Ford, sorry.
Yep.
No, I think that he has been put in a really tough situation with the pandemic, and honestly, I think that he had to make some really hard decisions that I feel that, honestly, I think that Justin Trudeau took a back seat on some of these decisions, and then he had to make some decisions that I think helped Ontarians in the long run.
Okay.
And I think he did a very good job, and I think that I wouldn't want to be in his position.
No,
and I think a lot of people don't consider that. And he took what the health professionals said and tried to put those into action. And we need to start applauding people for the things that they tried to do for the best of the people. And I think that that's what he did. And I think that people spend too much time criticizing our government. And I think that he was proactive and if people voted for Justin, and I think Justin put like our country on the side burner, I think that people should be voting for Ford again.
All right. Vote for Ford again. Tough job, and he did a good job, you're saying, Rebecca, basically.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, okay. Gotcha, Rebecca. Good call. 750-1310. Queen's Park back in action today. June 2nd, Ontario election campaign. Does Doug Ford deserve another 4 years? Martin in Carleton Place. You're on City News. Martin. All right. Bad connection out there in Carleton Place. Sean in Orleans. Sean.
Hey, Rob, how you doing?
I'm good, Sean. Does Doug Ford deserve another 4 years as Premier of Ontario?
I think he does. I think he handled the pandemic as well as anyone could. I think he was under a gun the whole time with criticism for the press, and a lot of it was unfair.
Okay.
And I'd like to get back to some conservative basics. Wasn't his promise he was going to go line by line and get rid of redundancies and inefficiencies?
Yep. 4 cents on the dollar, sir. 4 cents on the dollar. You're telling me we can't go through the government and find 4 cents on the dollar? That's what he used to say.
And
right?
I'd like to see, somebody once and for all take these teachers' unions to task. I'm not saying destroy them. They do a valuable job. But the power they possess to dictate public policy and health policy is beyond bizarre to me. I think we got to take these guys to task. And, I loved when you were on the OC Transpo stuff. Let's stop the transfer payments to having these giant buses driving around with no one on them, paying people $60,000 a year.
Well, on the provincial government's role in our public transit system, the provincial government provides annual funding by way of gas tax revenue, so there's that. Plus, light rail doesn't get built without provincial government money. It's supposed to be split 3 ways, right? The city, the feds, and the provincial government. I guess what I would want to know, given all of these problems now, like the light rail in Ottawa's a national news story now.
It's a disaster.
Like Councillor Deans was on the national CTV morning show this morning calling for a public inquiry into light rail. They're writing about it in the Toronto Star now, as if anybody in Toronto cares about Ottawa's light rail problems. But they're writing about it now. It's getting all of this attention, national attention about the problems here. I guess here's what I want to know. As far as I understand it, for Phase 3 of light rail, the provincial government has yet to commit any money to that, Sean. Right?
Okay.
And it's not going to get built without that money. If I'm Doug Ford, do I really want Doug Ford spending my money on this kind of light rail stuff anymore here in Ottawa?
No, and here's another question for you, Rob, is let's face it, the light rail was never really said, but I always figured this was about shuttling the 150,000 civil servants we have in Ottawa to and from work. It doesn't sound like any of them are really excited about going back to work, so do we even need the light rail anymore?
Well, yeah, good question.
That's a question I think is worth discussing. Anyways, I appreciate your time.
All right, thank you, Sean. Thank you. Yep, 750-1310, 750-1310. Well, I mean, on light rail as well as Doug Ford. This is the 3rd week without a functioning light rail system. Remember, the early estimate was it'll be down 3 weeks. Do you have any confidence, David, that light rail's going to be fixed by the end of this week? They're just hiring now the second firm to be like the independent safety overseer now.
I would say my confidence that it's going to be back next week is about the same that there won't be a Panda Game party next year. So low.
And it's hard to appreciate right now, I think, the total toll that this is taking on the long-term viability of this entire endeavor, Phase 1, Phase 2, and eventually, I guess, someday, Phase 3, right? I mean, by the time it's all said and done, assuming Phase 3 ever actually does get the go-ahead and gets the funding it needs, and this project ever does actually get to, say, the city center of Canada and deep into the East End and deep down into the South End, how much time and money will we have invested in all of this? This will have been, a multi-decade project? costing what? $10 billion, maybe more than that? Isn't that a lot of money to be putting into a technology, into a system with this record of performance? 2 years? Do we not have a pretty good idea how this thing performs now after 2 years? It's been 2 years. And look, ladies and gentlemen, there were already all kinds of questions about just what kind of rebound there would be for public transit ridership post-COVID. And we're not post-COVID yet. And the rebound is 35% of what it was before. 35%. It was going to be harder than ever just because of COVID to convince people to get back onto public transit. Hey, come back to public transit. Sit next to a complete stranger. You don't need to know their vaccine status. Cram onto this bus. Ride this light rail train. It might get you there. What is the selling point right now? What is your pitch, right, if you're OC Transpo? With each passing day that we are down on light rail, there are more and more people who are going to say, I'm never doing that again. I will work closer to home. I will buy a bicycle. I will Uber. I will endure rush hour on the Queensway in my safe private vehicle. And now throw in derailments. And mercifully, nobody hurt in either derailment. And I'm not fear-mongering or anything. But even a member of the city staff said at the most recent meeting of the Transit Commission, said he didn't even want to think about how bad this could have been if this train had been, say, moving at a higher rate of speed, going over a busy roadway or waterway or going through the tunnel. Not fear-mongering, just pointing out the obvious. Rob Snow Show City News.
The food cupboard started about 25 years ago. Again, it was a very small operation in the basement of a church. And we have been expanding to the point where we needed to have a new facility. So in discussion with the city of Ottawa and Jan Harder, the local representative here, we came to this location, which is about 2,000 square feet, located in the Walter Baker Center. We've been here for about 2 years, and it is much better. It gives us a much broader opportunity to serve our clients better. It's a fairly affluent community in Barrhaven, so you wouldn't think that people would really need to have a food bank or a food cupboard. But people sometimes have a temporary loss of their job, maybe new immigrants or refugees to the community. Maybe there's been an injury in the family or something like a pandemic that causes people to run short of food during their monthly requirements. So we offer any clients who come and live in our catchment area the opportunity to pick up an order of food every 3 or 4 weeks. The need varies from time to time. We have expanded our offering to include quite a few perishables, eggs, milk, cheese, yogurt, vegetables, fruit. But people, I think, know that we need cans of beans and stuff as well, too. One thing that we're consistently short of sometimes is personal hygiene products. You go to the grocery store, you buy your toothpaste and you buy your deodorant and shampoo there. People don't automatically think that to donate those kinds of things to a food cupboard. So we end up buying quite a few of those things from time to time. The pandemic has affected us like it has everybody. Initially, we had to stop the grocery store food donations so that we didn't have any risk of contamination and to have a significant number of volunteer work to be done in our facility. We have a storefront, so it's like a mini grocery store where you take a cart and you go around and pick out the things that you want. That doesn't work during the pandemic to maintain social distancing and so on. So what we have now is our clients can come in one at a time, they make an appointment, they stand behind a line, and they direct our volunteer to, I'd like Kellogg's cornflakes rather than Harvest Crunch, to pick the food that they would like off the shelves according to the allocation, depending on the size of their family. And then they take it out, load it into their vehicle or whatever, bring back the cart, we disinfect everything, and prepare for the next client. We are very blessed here in Barrhaven. We're a totally volunteer organization. So if you give a dollar to us, it goes to purchasing food or to provide some service to our clients.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Final quarter of the Talkback Hour here, 750-1310. We're talking about a wild and crazy night on Russell Avenue. Panda Game pandemonium, the post-Panda Game party, what should happen there? Doug Ford's re-election chances. Does he deserve another 4-year term as Ontario Premier and Light Rail? It's all in the mix today. Michelle, Ottawa South. Good morning. You're on City News. Michelle.
Good morning, Rob. I was
Hi.
listening and enjoying all the different opinions, but I have to tell you, on Saturday morning at 12 or 12:15, I was driving into Sandy Hill. We were at Mann Avenue and Lee's, and it was busy. There was buses pulling into the arena parking lot. There was a COVID clinic happening at the corner at the university. And everywhere you looked, all the way up Mann Avenue, were groups of police officers in yellow vests, full tactical, and groups of 6 and groups of 10. And as you drove up the hill, you were looking, down the streets in Sandy Hill, and you could see they were on all the streets surrounding. It was intimidating. And I actually said to my mother-in-law, I think you're in the safest place on earth right now. I have no idea how it boiled down so quickly.
Right.
Other than it's happening in other university towns too, and there's something in our culture where that we celebrate this drunken rite of passage where, the stupider they can be and outdo the previous generations, the greater they think it is. And it's absolutely disgusting and ridiculous that, that you should be proud of this behavior. And we need to examine what it is that we would spend our tax dollars to have all these people out there to babysit these bozos. Just stop selling them booze. Like, come on, really. In regards
Stop
to
selling booze. We don't want to babysit any more bozos. Holy cow. That's a mouthful right there.
It's a great campaign sticker that police can wear it. Anyway,
Okay.
and Doug Ford,
Yes.
if you can hear me, you are really in trouble in Ottawa South, and I'll tell you why. Having just done the federal election and door knocking, I can't tell you how many Liberals came running to the door to tell me how PO'd they were, in very nice, expensive homes, I might add, that Doug Ford wasn't going to pay for their eyeglasses. They are crazy about that and wouldn't recognize the difference between provincial and federal. So, I know we don't hold a seat in this riding, but, I mean, if they're talking like that here, I just don't understand what it is about people where they say, they want everything, but they don't want to pay for it. They want somebody else to pay for it. I don't know. And there was one last thing about the transit. It's a joke, and it's such a waste of money, and it's so refreshing to listen to Carol Ann when you have her on the show. And I'm fortunate enough that I do not have to rely on any type of public transit, but I know many people who do, and it's just terrible to put these people, especially with the cold winter that's coming, and just not knowing the stress and aggravation. Why doesn't anybody do like a GoFundMe and they have a class action lawsuit, the transit riders, and go after these decision makers in these companies and hold them accountable?
Interesting idea, Michelle. I'm going to run because everybody's called here in the last 5 minutes of the hour. Let's take this one. Norm in Ottawa on Light Rail. Norm.
Yeah, how's it going?
It goes, sir. With or without me, it always goes.
Well,
The only thing I got on this, like, I was eager for the LRT to come in. I've spent 4 years in Europe, so I've seen all the big cities over there where you don't have to drive into any of the big cities because it all works, right?
It all works.
So, in my opinion, we were 20 years behind the 8 ball on this one anyway. It should have been 20 or 30 years ago we had this. But should this even really cost us anything? Like, is there not deliverables? Like, I know they were getting fined for delays when it wasn't ready to go when it should have been ready to go.
Good point.
Is there not penalties for, like, you didn't hit deliverable? We didn't buy a train that should go and run off the track. Like,
exactly.
It should be free for us.
Yeah, I think they're looking at that right now.
Okay.
Right.
So
what about good satisfactory or money refunded? How about something like that?
That's what I mean.
Right.
Should that not be in the contract somewhere?
Yeah, it worked for Eaton's for a century in Canada. What about our light rail system? Thank you, Norm. Yeah, good point.
Okay, have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Yeah. John Hallville. John.
Good morning, Rob.
Morning, John. Good to hear from you again, sir. Thank you. Does Doug Ford deserve another 4 years?
I don't think he does.
You don't think he does? Okay. All right. Why is that?
I like to go against the flow.
Okay. All right.
Well,
fair enough.
I don't think he's made enough good decisions in the last year and a half. He abdicated the decision-making to less qualified people.
Okay.
And I don't think he has any more qualified people backing him up than Justin Trudeau does.
Okay, when you say abdicated, do you mean he kind of handed off too much responsibility, for example, to health officials who aren't elected?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, okay. Interesting. Yep. Yeah, okay.
Yep. Okay. I don't think there's enough people on the science table with enough knowledge about virology and immunology and vaccinology to help them out.
Okay.
And David Williams and I guess it was Barbara Yaffe just did what they were told. And that's what everybody's just done. Done what they were told, didn't have an original thought. And what really scares me is this 2-year period. We will have lost any opportunity to learn anything. And when the next problem comes along, we're not going to have a healthcare system to look after it.
Okay. All right, John, thank you. We're right at a time. I thank you for your call and making those points and going against the grain, as you say. 750-1310. We'll do that again tomorrow between 10 and 11 o'clock. It's the Talk Back Hour, and this is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, October 4th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 11 degrees, 10 degrees in Smiths Falls, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. The city has found an independent consultant now that is reviewing the return to service plan for Confederation Line. Ottawa City Manager Steve Kanellakos told Council today in a memo they have hired Philadelphia-based TRA for this job. The firm has already sent staff to the LRT system for a preliminary look. The city initially hired STV, but the firm wouldn't have been a truly independent contractor since it had done past LRT-related work for the city. Kanellakos says TRA has had no previous dealings with Rideau Transit Group's parent companies and has not done work for the city of Ottawa. The LRT has been down since September 19th when a train derailed near Tremblay Station. On the COVID front today, 511 more cases in Ontario, 2 additional deaths. The province says there are 46 more cases in Ottawa, 9 in Eastern Ontario, 3 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 1 more case in Renfrew. Over 23,600 tests were done. For these numbers, 2% of those coming back positive. City News Time, 11:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Rather mixed conditions for us today. Some sunny breaks, slight chance of showers too, and a brisk wind out of the east. The high about 15. Tonight, cloudy, slight chance of showers and 11. For today, the high 15.
And right now, 11 degrees in Ottawa. It's 10 degrees in Smiths Falls. Some residents of Russell Avenue in Sandy Hill are wondering why the Panda Game post-game party got so out of hand. This weekend, following the annual U-Ottawa Carleton football game, the president of Action Sandy Hill, their community association, says there was deliberate destruction. Susan Khazaeli says there was purposeful destruction.
They're not happy. They felt that they were endangered, that their rights to the enjoyment of their property was of course ruined that evening, and they felt that they weren't supported by the police presence that evening.
Now, she says among the possible solutions, some are suggesting cancel future Panda Games. It's an annual event involving Carleton and Ottawa football teams. Provincial government has laid out the plan for the final sitting of the legislature.
It really didn't lay out any new initiatives. However, the speech did promise that the government will grow the economy not through tax hikes or spending cuts, but simply by encouraging economic growth by doing things like building highways and building transit. It also said any future lockdowns should hopefully be localized to prevent any impact on businesses. Government House Leader Paul Calandra attempted to defend the short 7-page speech.
Optimistic but cautious. It does highlight some of the things that we want to do. It's not just about COVID, obviously, but also moving forward on an economic recovery post-COVID, as the speech from the throne talks about building Ontario, talks about restoring that economic engine that we really had prior to the outbreak of COVID.
The speech from the throne didn't mention education once, something Ontario Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca was quick to pounce on.
Nothing but empty rhetoric from Doug Ford and his government today, and absolutely shocking that we had to wait this long to hear so little from someone who's been in hiding for months.
Now, Premier Ford was in his seat in the legislature, but didn't take questions from reporters. Reporting live at Queen's Park, Richard Southern.
City News Time, 11:04.
Space, the final frontier.
And Captain Kirk will be there. William Shatner is going to blast off from West Texas on October 12th. Jeff Bezos' space travel company Blue Origin announced Shatner will join the flight with 3 others at age 90. Shatner will become the oldest person ever in space. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Well, we've talked about Panda Game parties. Time to talk about Pandora Papers. Now with Geoffrey Johnston, he is international affairs columnist with the Kingston Whig-Standard, with us every Monday morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
The Pandora Papers, kind of a follow-up to the Panama Papers, the secret wealth and dealings of world leaders, politicians, billionaires, celebrities has been exposed. It's one of the biggest leaks of financial documents ever. Why does this matter, Geoffrey Johnston?
I first want to say journalism matters. This is another example of why investigative journalism is so important. Yeah, this is, I think, the third such leak, because the other one was the Paradise Papers. So
Paradise Papers. Okay. Yep.
That's right. So basically what this is this international consortium of journalists have uncovered this leak of a treasure trove of financial services documents and from lawyers of these really rich individuals and corporations. And basically what it is it lays out how these really rich companies and individuals are engaging in either tax evasion, and that's basically when you illegally evade paying your fair share of taxes, or tax avoidance, and that's when individuals or companies avoid paying taxes, but it's legal, but the system itself is sort of immoral because they're obviously not paying their fair share. Why should we care? Well, number one, when the super rich and multinational corporations don't pay their fair share, it means everybody else, so the rest of us, have to end up by paying for services, or important services are cut. In the developing world, it's even worse because, the super rich and these big companies don't pay for services that will actually save lives. This is a big problem. I've written about this before. I know there are international organizations such as Oxfam that are really concerned about it. So Oxfam recently released some data on this. So they say that 9 out of 10 of the world's top 200 companies have a presence in tax havens, while corporate investment in tax havens quadrupled between 2001 and 2014. So it's a really big problem. They also say that 50 of the biggest U.S. companies stashed $1.6 trillion offshore in 2015, and 20 of Europe's biggest banks are registering over a quarter of their profits in tax havens. So and this is a big problem. That means a lot of lost government revenue.
Okay. This, though, seems to focus on individuals, right? So let's talk about one in particular. For example, the King of Jordan, okay? Now, I have in front of me here a Government of Canada website from Global Affairs, okay? Because Jordan is a major beneficiary of Canadian foreign aid because there have been significant, and you've written about them, human crises in Jordan, sometimes not of its own making. But, for example, Global Affairs estimates that there are almost 700,000 refugees living in Jordan from Syria because of the civil war in Syria. And Jordan's economy has very little capacity to absorb such a thing. But Canadians, and I'm saying Canadians, not necessarily the government of Canada, in foreign aid have sent to Jordan $4 billion since 2016, right? A lot of money, Geoffrey. A lot of money. We are one of the top donor countries to Jordan in terms of foreign aid, the government of Canada. But now, as a result of these papers, okay, it has been revealed that the King of Jordan has spent hundreds of millions of dollars acquiring properties in the United States and all over the United Kingdom. Like 70 million euros worth of property. So you can't help but wonder, how is he able to do that? And is he able to do that in part because of the generosity of Canadians and the Canadian government? That's another thing that I find an interesting angle about it as well, Geoffrey. Corruption. Is it corruption, basically?
It definitely is corruption. Absolutely, there is corruption. Another angle to that as well, the British are also now asking why didn't they set up a strict register of offshore buyers in the United Kingdom to determine what's going on? Because a lot of this, you're right, a lot of these people end up by buying properties in the UK. Yeah, it goes back to corruption, and we've talked about this in the past too, regarding SNC-Lavalin. So when there is corruption in developing countries or low and middle income countries, it hurts everybody in that country and the people who need it. But also, you're making the point, it's a good one, we're giving Canadian tax dollars earned from people like you and I and other hardworking people who don't have billions of dollars. We're paying our fair share, whereas you have the top 1% around the world who really are paying little or no tax, and this hurts everybody. The thing about Jordan is they are on the front line of the refugee crisis in the Middle East.
Right.
And the thing about that is if we did not help them, a lot of those refugees, because most refugees want to stay in the region, and we do know that the refugee crisis was destabilizing Europe. So this was a really important thing for us to, I would say, invest in, because it helped stabilize the international system. So I still think what we did was the right thing to do, but it is infuriating when you hear that the king is basically getting away with tax fraud, basically.
I think that of all the ones that come out of these papers, the Pandora Papers, it's the Tony Blair story is the most remarkable. Because Tony Blair, there was a time when he was supposed to be a left-winger, right? He was leader of the Labour Party, right? So I've isolated, this is one of our radio news reports, because this is a nice kind of 30-second synopsis of it here. So play the radio news report for Geoffrey for us.
He may be known as Teflon Tony here, but this particular issue may stick. Leaked documents show Tony Blair and his wife didn't pay a penny of the $421,000 in tax when buying an $8.4 million London townhouse. That's because they bought the offshore firm that previously owned it, and then closed that company after the transaction. The loophole legal, but the optics bad. Previously, Blair had stated publicly that the tax system is a haven of scams, perks, and financial district deals. Tom Rivers, ABC.
Isn't that a great report? So, look, here's what a townhouse comes up for sale in a global city like London. They move in, they buy it. They have a land tax in the UK that's called the stamp tax. Mm-hmm. And when you buy a property or a piece of land and it's over a certain price, it will be subject to what they call the stamp tax. But that's not what they didn't buy, the property or the land. They bought the shell company that owned the property or the land instead. They just bought all the shares in the shell company, and they saved, by doing that, I just did the currency conversion here, $534,000 Canadian.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. Former Labour Prime Minister in the UK, Tony Blair. Right?
One would expect better from a former Prime Minister. One would expect better from a former Labour leader. Now, that's an example of what we were just talking about, tax avoidance. So what he did was legal.
Yeah.
But it was not moral. And this is what governments in the West are going to have to move to close these loopholes, because as Oxfam says, it is a very complex but very loose global tax system. And there have been meetings of finance ministers of the G7 and the G20 in the past, and they've talked about this issue. It's a big problem right now. So the president of Kenya, President Kenyatta, and his family is very wealthy, and they're named in these papers as well. And Kenya is a developing nation, and this is another place where they cannot afford to be losing tax revenue, because as Oxfam points out, when you're talking about, hundreds of millions of dollars being evaded, they're evading hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenues, that means child and maternal health don't get paid for. So that means, women and babies died needlessly. So this has real world consequences. And when we look at a place like Russia, Vladimir Putin's relative, or the lady who supposedly gave birth to a baby, who knows what the relationship is between them, but she ends up by getting this apartment for free, no tax or anything. Putin is basically looting the treasury of Russia, and he's using his political power to do this. So this is something that the consortium of journalists who did this have done a real public service. Now it's up to politicians and the voters to pressure those politicians to actually create a more fair tax system and have the enforcement to actually go after this kind of money, because in the end, we all pay for this kind of corruption.
Okay. The Pandora Papers, according to Geoffrey Johnston from the Kingston Whig-Standard. Thank you so much. Great stuff this morning, Geoffrey. Thanks again. Okay.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, bye-bye. David Sali standing by with some of the week's top business stories. He's with the Ottawa Business Journal. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
An old-fashioned traditional grocery store. You're going to find a butcher, okay? You want a steak cut a certain way, you're going to get it. There's flour piled in the warehouse. There's mixers on the floor. There's flour on the floor. The bakery's rented out to Frank Nicolo. It's him and his son come in at night. They mix the dough, they roll the dough, and they bake the dough. It's not the traditional frozen and thaw and put it in the bin, okay? It's made from scratch 7 days a week. It's probably the only bakery left in Ottawa that does that. Then customer service. We're big on that. The cashiers, the deli. You're not. If you ask for something, they're not going to point. It's an aisle number 7. They're going to bring you there. Okay. If you have too much groceries out, we'll take it out to your car. You know what I mean? There's nothing we don't do for our customers, and we evolved around our customers. They would come in and say, can you try getting me this? Can you get me this? So that's how we built the lineup we have now. Okay. So we have a lot of unique items that someone that came over to live in Canada hasn't seen this particular product, but we sourced it and we have it for them. That like something they used to have as a kid. We have a lot of those unique items, a lot. From like all over the world, and we source it through distributors in Montreal and Toronto that bring in the product in bulk, and we piggyback off of them. Probably the largest European deli in Ottawa. We sell lots because people buy lots. Nothing really complicated about that. We turn over a lot of product. We package it properly. We buy, and we're always consistent. You're always going to find, Cuddy turkey breast, San Daniel mortadella. You're always going to get the same brands. We don't flip back and forth to save 20 cents. It's always the same brands the last 29 years. Best sandwiches in town. It's simple. It starts off with fresh bread every day baked in the store. Anything that's left over goes to breadcrumbs. So you're getting a fresh bun every day that was baked probably 4 hours before you get here. Okay? Not only baked, made. Like, mix the flour, roll the dough, proof the bread, and bake the bread. Okay? Then all the ingredients come right off the shelves. Your lettuce, your tomatoes, all your condiments, and they're cut up fresh in the deli. Not like the big, corporate restaurant chains that your lettuce comes in shredded in a bag. You open it up and you throw it in the bin. Takes 2 or 3 days to get here from California. How long is it in the bag? The big difference is like making a sandwich at home, and you don't have to do the work. It's really what the trick is, and using the freshest ingredients possible.
Community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
David Sali's here from the Ottawa Business Journal. Some of the top business stories of the week. Good morning, David Sali.
Good morning,
Good to hear from you. I will say this right now because it's a bit tough on the stock market today. And tech shares are leading the decline, and that includes a company that we talk about quite frequently when you are here. Canada's most valuable company and Ottawa's most valuable company. We're talking about Shopify. Shopify is down today. Shopify's off about, let me see here, about 5% today. It's off about 5%.
Just about 5%, exactly.
Down about $82.
Yeah.
And tech stocks have been cool the last little while. And Shopify in the last month is down 16%.
Yeah.
Okay. But it is still up year to date by about 16%. And don't remember, ladies and gentlemen, there was a time when you could have had shares in Shopify, if you go all the way back to, say, 2050, you could have had shares in Shopify for $35. And they are $1,625 today. So it has been a pretty good long-term hold for a lot of people. So.
Absolutely. So if you were one of the lucky ones who got in early,
yeah.
Well, you're laughing.
Some
today.
people have done very well. There is a reason there is a Maserati dealership in Ottawa. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, that's the Shopify news. How is our housing market here in Ottawa? You have a write-up about that at the Ottawa Business Journal.
Well, yeah, Rob, we this has been a continuing theme for, it seems like years now that we've been talking about how Ottawa's housing market is at risk of overheating, quote unquote. And I mean, we've seen it, the regular, 20, 30% month over month increases from the previous year. Whenever I write my monthly reports from the Ottawa Real Estate Board, everybody who's been trying to buy a house knows what it's like out there. Things have been easing up a little bit recently. The market seems to have cooled off a bit, but according to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, the Ottawa market is still at risk of continued overheating. It said in its latest quarterly assessment, that active listings remain at historic lows, which means if demand ticks up again, that could cause the pot to start boiling over again, so to speak, Rob. So CMHC, if you're looking for relief in prices, it doesn't have good news for you. It says it's likely to, prices are likely to stay in their upward climb. It points to the stability of the local economy. Obviously, a lot of government workers, we haven't had necessarily the same kind of shocks as some other places, or IT sector, that sort of thing. So basically, CMHC says it looks like the upward pressure on prices is still going to continue as long as demand continues to lag. And that has been a bit of a chronic problem here for a while, as you know.
Yeah. Okay. Now, let's talk about things at the Infinity Convention Center, because I certainly remember during the depths of the lockdown, speaking with the general manager of the Infinity Center, and the events that were canceled, and real insight into just how important the convention business is to the local economy. And viability seemed to be in question there for a while, and how it's all connected. The convention center and all the other offshoot businesses that a convention center feeds and relies on. But the Infinity Convention Center is back in business again, back open again, and there was a big gala to kind of celebrate that. It looks like a very happy mood as well, David.
Yeah, absolutely. And our Caroline Phillips was there on Friday night when the Infinity Convention Center, which is, of course, right near the airport, it reopened. And as Caroline said in her lead, there were 250 guests there, and they got to party like it was 2019. And Rob, and so 250 guests, which is of course not anywhere near capacity for the big ballroom, but it's a start, right? And we've got to start somewhere, and they felt that was a reasonable number. Everybody had to show proof of their vaccination in order to get in, that they have been fully vaxxed, and staff remained masked throughout the night. But nonetheless, everyone was in the mood to party. Of course, the center's owned by the Agarwal and Sohal families. They were out in full force. There was, everybody was there, from Jim Watson to Lisa McLeod. You had Bill Malhotra, Claridge Holmes. You had all kinds of movers and shakers in the local business community.
Yep.
And it was a black tie.
Looks like the party of the year, honest to goodness. Like the place to see and be seen kind of thing,
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody dressed to the nines. To the nines. Black tie event, and great food throughout the night. And open bar. So that's a party right there. That's all you need to say.
Lucky it didn't devolve into a panda riot by the sounds of things.
No, it didn't. There were dancers. There was glitter, like you name it. But thankfully, no riots.
That's good. Hey, look, David. Always great to hear from you, sir. Thank you so much for your updates.
Okay, Rob, thanks.
David Sali from the Ottawa Business Journal. He's with us every Monday morning. So, still ahead, Throne Speech Day for the Government of Ontario, launching its legislative agenda ahead of provincial election, which will be held in early June of next year. We'll hear from the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, Stephen Del Duca. That's coming up right after the 11:30 news. And third shots. Will we eventually, all of us, potentially, will we be getting third shots, booster shots of COVID-19 vaccine? Dawn Bowdish, Executive Director, Firestone Institute of Respiratory Health Canada Research Chair in Aging and Immunity, will join us as well, coming up at 12:45 on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
This is Monday, the 4th of October. Good morning, I'm Jason White. Right now in Ottawa, mostly cloudy, 13 degrees. It's 11 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news this hour. The head of the Sandy Hill Community Association says the weekend post-Panda game chaos was predictable and that residents feel not enough was done to combat the vandalism and rowdiness. She says this year some residents were threatened and police were outnumbered. And some residents now wonder if it's time to cancel the annual Panda game between Carleton and Ottawa. The City of Ottawa has hired an outside consultant to review the return to service plan for its wonky O trains. Philadelphia-based TRA has been hired. The firm's already sent up some staff. The O train's been down since the September 19th derailment near Tremblay Station. Ottawa's Planning Committee approves the master plan for the new Civic Hospital near Dow's Lake. 2 councillors voted against the plan, including Kitchissippi's Jeff Leeper. He says his no vote was because of the above-ground parking garage and what he feels is an uncertain transit connection. The plan will now rise to City Council for final approval. Ontario's government signals that the next 8 months until the provincial election will be about shoring up the healthcare and long-term care systems and spurring economic recovery while coming out of the pandemic. Massive levels of new spending for supports during the pandemic have left Ontario in a significant financial hole. This morning's throne speech says the province's economic recovery will be fueled by growth, not spending cuts or tax hikes. City News Time, 11:31. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Yes, as you just heard in our newscast, the Lieutenant Governor delivered the throne speech this morning, marking the start of the new legislative session for MPPs and Ford Nation. The Ford government says the next 8 months, it's 8 months until the election. The focus will be on healthcare, improving the healthcare system, improving the long-term care system, and the economic recovery as hopefully we emerge from this pandemic. So let's get some opposition reaction to the speech from the throne this morning. We're joined and we're pleased to welcome him back to the Rob Snow Show, the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, Stephen Del Duca. Good morning, Mr. Del Duca.
Good morning, Rob. Thanks for having me back on.
My pleasure, sir. So what is your reaction to what you heard in the speech from the throne this morning?
Well, I think it's really, it's actually quite stunning to think that Doug Ford needed to prorogue and then needed to wait an extra several weeks to the other side of a federal campaign to come out with a speech from the throne that was really, there really wasn't much there. So my initial reaction was, I don't know why this required a throne speech, number one. And then secondly, if you look through the text of what was said, not a single word in there mentioning education. For example, nothing in there about $10 a day licensed childcare. Nothing in there about essential workers, in particular as it relates to things like paid sick leave. I'm really surprised that it wasn't more ambitious for the people of Ontario. There just wasn't more to it. It just seemed it was empty rhetoric, I guess is the best way for me to describe it.
Okay, but what about what was in there? Healthcare, for example, a $5 billion commitment to hire more than 20,000 people for long-term care. What about those pledges?
Well, look, again, when I say empty rhetoric, I mean it in every regard. So not only was there a bunch of stuff missing, but I also mean empty rhetoric in terms of Doug Ford, like he's done throughout the pandemic, saying some of the right things. So, look, I support investments in healthcare and in long-term care. I want to see more staff. I know we have a serious, for example, very serious problem with a nurses shortage right now, and it's only going to get worse. We also saw a federal Liberal government commit to more investments in healthcare that should help a province like Ontario. The question will be, will Doug Ford actually back up those words today with anything real? And given his track record, I'm gravely concerned that what he does bring forward will be half-hearted. It'll be late, because it's almost always late when it comes from Doug, and it's an investment. And so I think that's something that should concern the people of Ontario, generally speaking.
What are the challenges right now, particularly when I'd like to know what you're hearing as someone who I'm sure has their ear to the ground What are the challenges right now when it comes to maintaining staffing levels in the healthcare system and the long-term care system? To me, just as an observer, it seems as though Ontario is kind of in a global bidding war, especially when it comes to nurses. Ontario's competing with every other Canadian province, all the American states, and probably a few countries around the world right now for nurses right now.
Yeah, listen, I think, Rob, you're right about that, but Doug Ford made a difficult situation where we had to compete for that kind of talent. He made it dramatically worse. Your listeners might remember he introduced legislation that, for example, Bill 124 was the name of it, that capped the amount that nurses could receive by way of compensation, like their raises or lack thereof, depending on collective bargaining. He chose to short circuit that entire process and limit what they could receive. We see in our neighboring province like Quebec, they're providing incentives and supports to defray the cost of tuition. That the contracts can be negotiated fairly through a collective bargaining process.
Annual bonuses too, $15,000, right? So
so it's really when you've got a shortage and it's been looming for a little while and it's grown only worse during a pandemic, whether it's personal support workers or it's nurses or anybody else that you really do rely upon, you can't kind of attack their profession, tell them that you don't really value them, and then expect that more women and men will want to take up that profession here in Ontario. So Doug Ford really, again, got to back up the words with something real. Scrap the legislation. Make it seem like you really do value people who work as personal support workers and nurses, and drive those numbers up so we can be on par with Quebec and others.
I should add, Andrea Horwath pointed this out this morning. The Dalton McGuinty government was down this road before. At that time, it wasn't with nurses. It was actually with Ontario teachers. Froze their pay, and that was taken to court, and the government lost on that. So, and the court said you couldn't interfere with that they'd violated collective bargaining rights. So we've kind of been there before, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know Andrea likes to spend probably more time attacking me and Liberals than she does Doug Ford. Yeah, I'll leave her playbook to her and her team. I know that right now people in Ontario are desperately nervous, as they should be, about the fact that we do have a shortage of nurses. Our personal support workers in long-term care homes don't get paid appropriately. I know I earlier talked about education. I dropped my kids off at school this morning. The fact that before I went down to Queen's Park to respond to the throne speech, the fact that nothing in today's throne speech referenced my kids' classrooms in schools across this province is just mind-boggling to me. And of course, $10 a day childcare. The federal election just proved the people of Ontario want a deal. Overwhelmingly, they supported that initiative here in Ontario, and Doug Ford's got to get a good deal for Ontario done right away. But he didn't even mention it today. It's just shocking.
Okay. We can talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes' time. There's some other things I want to get to right now. If memory serves, the Ontario government finally, after a lot of public pressure, did bring in a paid sick leave program, and the plan was to extend it until the end of the year, right? It was three paid sick days, right? 3 paid sick days?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What should happen longer term with that, in your opinion, Mr. Del Duca?
So, first of all, you are right. It took them an awfully long time to get there, more than 400 days for Doug Ford to do the right thing, which is really scary. They brought in 3 paid sick days. We have called during the pandemic for the expansion of that program to be, broadened and deepened so that it's 10 days paid for by the provincial government during the pandemic. I think there's pretty clear consensus that we need a paid sick leave program that goes beyond the pandemic, and I've had the chance to speak with whether it's people in the business community or the advocacy sector. I'm pretty sure the other parties feel the same way. There needs to be a program in place. There was one that we had brought forward. Doug Ford killed it when he became premier 3.5 years ago. Beyond the pandemic, should it be 5 days, 3 days, 10 days? I think we have to have a discussion about that. I think we also have to take into account who's paying the freight for that. I know there are tons of small business owners that need help. The pandemic-related paid sick leave is paid for by the provincial government. I do think we need the bigger conversation about how we go forward on that and who pays the bills. I don't want to do anything that makes it tougher for small business owners to get back on their feet and survive after what they've gone through. And I look forward to having that conversation. openly. I hope the other parties will as well.
Okay. On you mentioned $10 a day childcare, and in advance of the federal election campaign, a number of agreements were signed between the federal government and the provinces. Most provinces are on side now. The Ontario government is not, at least just yet. But there are rumors that a deal is going to happen, but it may be to coincide for maximum political effect. It will coincide with an election call in Ontario, so Doug Ford can kind of take credit for $10 a day childcare, bringing $10 a day childcare. Just political speculation, which we sometimes do on this radio station. But look, even if that's the case, and let's say there comes a day when Doug Ford is facing the cameras and there's the Prime Minister sitting next to him, and they come to an agreement on $10 a day childcare and they do the big news event. Will you give him credit for that? Would you give him credit for that, Mr. Del Duca?
Yeah, so I have repeatedly throughout the pandemic, when Doug Ford has done the right thing and has done it promptly, I've been quite comfortable giving him credit for that. I'm self-aware enough to acknowledge that nobody's got a monopoly on a good idea. And I don't think most Ontarians really care that much about which party is getting credit. They just want progress. They just want good things. And I share that goal or that objective. So if Doug Ford gets a deal for the people of Ontario that's a good deal for Ontario, that will truly deliver $10 a day licensed childcare, and make sure we have the early childhood educators in place to populate that system and make sure that moms and dads can really get that kind of relief, I'll be the first person to be supportive. I put out my own plan back in May. I said today that I released our plan. I hope Doug Ford steals my plan. There are 5 key elements in it. I think the feds would agree to everything that I was proposing in my plan. That was back in May. You could be right, Rob, about Doug and his team deciding to wait till closer to an election campaign, but every single week that passes means that moms and dads, particularly working moms in this family, are one day further away from getting the real relief that they need in a childcare space that's licensed, that's $10 a day, for their kids to get the best start in life and for them to save a lot of money. And I don't know why anybody would want to delay that. So I hope Doug gets a deal, and if he does, and it's a good deal, I will be the first one to come on your show and say he did the right thing.
All right. I look forward to it. Okay. I do. I want to ask you, and I asked Andrea Horwath I think this is something that you'll see eye to eye on. I want to talk a little bit about Randy Hillier's an Eastern Ontario independent MPP.
Right.
You know all about his stand on vaccines and lockdowns and masks and everything else. But he was on social media, on Twitter. It was actually a tweet that was deleted by Twitter because it was encouraging violence, violating their terms of service, in advance of the return of the legislature, encouraging people to, quote, bring a pot of boiling hot tar and a case of feathers for politicians. That was one. And then there was another one that's not been deleted, but is no less provocative. If your, quote, if your country was under siege, your family threatened, your freedoms removed, would you stand and fight, quote unquote, would you bear arms? Would you bear arms? As someone who has been an MPP before and certainly hopes to be not only an MPP but premier someday, what do you think about a member of the elected legislature tweeting such things?
Oh, I think it's absolutely insane. And I think, I don't know, Randy's done a ton of irresponsible things, and in all the years that I've seen him, this might be the most irresponsible thing that I've seen him do or heard about him doing. I don't think he deserves to be an elected official. I don't think he's providing any kind of responsible or competent leadership. And I think that we've really seen during this pandemic a lot of people out there on the lunatic fringe kind of talking the way that Randy is talking about this stuff, and I think it's dangerous, and I think we should all put our heads together and figure out how we can protect free speech, but at the same time make sure that we are not being irresponsible. And if someone is, the way that he has been, I think they should face consequences.
Okay. Hey, Mr. Del Duca, always great to have you on the show, sir, and talk about the big issues of the day in Ontario. Thank you again.
My pleasure, Rob. Thanks so much.
All right, bye-bye. Stephen Del Duca, the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party. When we come back, we'll talk about vaccine booster shots on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
knew I was going to own my own business, and I've always wanted to have a store. And I sort of figured when the right concept came together at the right time, I would move forward with that plan. And so through doing some environmental initiatives in the restaurant group that I was with prior to opening this store, it just triggered my path towards being more environmentally conscientious and wanting to make more of a difference, and hopefully encouraging, inspiring other people to want to do the same, at which point the idea for All Eco was born. I have some really fun products. I have a really wide spectrum of products. So the things we look for in terms of qualifying products are sustainably made, upcycled, recycled, zero waste, all natural, no harmful chemicals to like the environment or to our bodies. We have like fun stuff, so like really clean burning candles, lots of really natural body care and skin care. I put a real emphasis on Canadian products. I really try to support up and comers, and I always source Canada first. The refill bar is really important to me. It's really huge. I think that's been exciting as well, because I thought it was going to be a real process in convincing people that this is a better way to go. And actually it was just like right away there was a built-in affinity towards doing refill, which has been great. We closed, I think probably we were closed down by before the second week of March. Just didn't feel we could comfortably or confidently stay open, even though I do sell essential products, like in terms of the cleaning. But we just didn't feel we could make a safe space for ourselves or our customers at that time, and especially with the information we had at the time. So we did close our doors, at which point I did not have a website, because I hadn't even scheduled myself to have a website at that point. So that was sort of like full speed moving towards that and trying to drive the business, at the same time still get myself on the map because I was so new. So during that time, as we were building the website, we were still doing a lot of video shopping and private shopping, online shopping, like online phone, text. Any way I could do business, I was doing it. And there was really a nice show of support for my business during that time, which was really, really encouraging. And now, we are fully set up online too.
Strong opinions.
Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
I have just learned that Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson will be on City News Ottawa right after the 12:30 news with Sam LaPrade to talk about many local issues, including the pandemonium this weekend in Sandy Hill and all the fallout and the investigations thus far after the Panda Game party that went way overboard. And some Sandy Hill residents are calling it a riot, that it wasn't a party, that actually what that was on Russell Avenue this weekend was actually a riot. So Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson on the Sam LaPrade Show coming up 12:30 here on City News. Now, are we about to get third shots? Will we need third shots? Is it only a matter of time before we need third shots of COVID-19 vaccine? Don Bowdish is back with us. Executive Director, Firestone Institute, Respiratory Health, Canada Research Chair in Aging and Immunity. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me back.
Well, it's great to have you back, Professor. And I thank you so much for your time. So what do you think? There's a lot of buzz that it's only a matter of time before we're all lining up for a third shot or another booster shot of COVID-19 vaccine.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, and the communication for all of these vaccines has always been a little bit dismal. But in truth, almost all of our adult vaccinations require 3 shots. So if you've ever had your hepatitis vaccine, if you're a woman, you've had HPV, most of our childhood vaccines all come in 3s. And that's because 3 really seems to be the magic number where most people have long-lasting protection. So some people are calling this 3rd dose that we will one day hypothetically have completing the series, meaning that it's not actually a booster.
Okay.
It's actually cementing and finalizing our vaccination. Where we actually do call it a booster is when we can tell, like our tetanus shot, when those antibody levels go down to the point where you're not protected. So folks in long-term care, the oldest old, people who are on immunosuppressive drugs, they legitimately have their immunity is sort of falling, and they need what we call a booster. I am mentally excited to line up for a booster shot, but I know that the data right now suggests that, I'm not really at risk of having an infection. My immunity isn't waning yet. So personally, I don't mind holding out because I know that there are a lot of vaccines that are specific to the new variants that are coming through. So if one of those happens to get ready in the next, 6 months is when I predict I'll probably need a booster. I'm happy to wait because it might give me more protection against the Delta variant.
Okay. The point being, if this is the case and we do need a 3rd shot, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary or unusual in medical science for this to be necessary.
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. It's very, very consistent. And, people said to me, well, why don't we get 3 shots for a flu shot? And the difference is, if you haven't had COVID, this is totally new for you. So you really have to train and teach your immune response. Whereas all of us have had influenza. We had it when we were babies and little kids, and we would have got vaccinated and things like that. So in effect, we've had doses 1 through 20 maybe or something like that, all those different exposures. And we just have to tweak the immune response to deal with whatever this year's strain is. Where for most of us who haven't had COVID, this is brand new education, and it takes time to educate the immune system.
Okay. Plus, we get a flu shot every year. Well, we should get a flu shot every year, right? Right,
yeah.
because the flu changes every year, right? The
That's
season
right.
of flu. So
That's right.
The flu shot changes as well, as I understand it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think about based on the science such as it is so far and the scientific knowledge that's been gained so far about the length of the efficacy of the vaccines after 2 shots?
Yeah, it looks like some of the best data that's come out looks like, depending on age, of course, because, young people are really and when I say young, I mean kids are really the dark horses here because they tend to form great immune responses that tend to be really long lasting. But for those of us who are adults, the predictions are anything from 6 months to 3 years, depending on how optimistic or non-optimistic you are with 2 doses. And with a 3rd dose, we'll probably be pushing upwards of a year. The challenge, the real big problem here that I think most people don't understand is our vaccine was made against the original variant. And it was miraculously effective against that. If that variant was still with us, wow, we'd all be, hugging, kissing each other and throwing parties and it would all be over. But now we have the Delta variant, and that's a different beast. So we're really relying on this vaccine, which was due for the original virus, protects us very, very well against death, but it's not absolutely perfect. And so there's a strong cohort of medical scientists and clinicians who think, if we can wait for another 6 months and hope that there's a variant-specific one, that's the best use. Because right now we're not having waning, and yet if we don't get these vaccines out to the rest of the world, we're going to have the Delta variant and the next variant and the variant after that, and we're going to be constantly in this race against time.
Right. Because there are large parts of the developing world where people haven't even had 1 shot, and we're already moving along. And Okay,
Exactly.
Interesting. Who can receive a 3rd dose? In Canada, it is the immunocompromised and people living in long-term care homes. So you would say that's the right approach right there. Right?
Yeah, I mean, one of our own studies definitely showed that a significant number of long-term care folks need a 3rd dose by about 5 or 6 months after. And that just makes sense. I mean, these folks don't have the perfect immune response. They just don't. They're on complex medications. They're older. They have complex health conditions. I mean, vaccination works
with a healthy immune system, and they just did not have the immune system to work with. So the fact they work as well as they do is just amazing, frankly. But they need it now for sure. And immunocompromised people, again, the same thing. They're working with an imperfect immune system, so their immune system needs more help. But for most of us, there's just no data that says that we need it yet. And we have to think short term and long term with these vaccines. Short term, obviously, we want our lives back. But if we don't look towards the long term, which is eliminating this virus in lots of parts of the world, it means it will never be fully safe to travel. It means that there will always be new variants arising, and we'll always be paying catch up. So it's just thinking about using the vaccines we have right now. The best use is not to give them to every single Canadian.
Okay. Now, the last time you were on the show, you were kind of geeking out, and all your science friends were saying, yeah, we are actually kind of excited about finding out what happens when people mix and match doses, and we're not afraid to mix and match doses. What about a third shot? Being different from even the previous two. Would that be a big deal for you? Or?
Absolutely. So one of our studies in long-term care actually showed that the Moderna one seems to induce better immunity, and that's probably because it has about 3 times the amount of messenger RNA in it. So, younger people, that's surplus to requirements probably, but for older people, they need a really strong boost, and same for the immunocompromised. So now we can start thinking about tweaking and, thinking, okay, if we've only got so many vaccines, let's give Moderna to these guys. The kids, we're more comfortable with Pfizer because there's slightly less side effects for that. And so now we can start tweaking and mixing and matching, and very excited about mixing and matching. In fact, one of the reasons we think that in Canada we're not seeing these breakthrough infections in the general public like it's been reported in the US and in Israel is because we extended the interval between the 2 doses, which seems to boost the immune system, and we use so much mixing and matching. So if you take all of us together, we've got all sorts of little bits of variance in our immune response, and that collectively looks like it might be protecting us more than countries that were really strict about using the same dose and on the very quick dosing schedule.
Interesting. Thank you for your time, as always.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Always learn so much.